Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradburn. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and I am just giddy, no Josh, for today's episode because we're starting a new series that I'm really excited about, Logan. We've got this stretch of the year now where the NFL is done. Obviously, we are not at the NBA playoffs yet, so we are going to be doing some all-time NBA rankings. I know you guys often enjoy those in the offseason. I absolutely love them, and we're kicking things off by ranking the top 10 passers in NBA history. Now, as is the case with any list, with any ranking, the criteria upon which we are working is so important here, and I think it may be more important for this list than any other, just because I think there's maybe the most room for interpretation in terms of how you value passing. Scoring, there may be some slight differences, right, in terms of what you value, but fundamentally we're all going to be pretty similar there. Defense, sort of the same idea. Passing, there's so many things that you can conceivably count or not count in a player's passing value. So I'm just interested in your criteria first, Logan. We may differ quite a bit here, but what are you factoring in for this list?
I'm factoring in a lot of different things. I will say off the top, I agonized over this list. This is one of the hardest lists that I think we've done a lot of historical rankings. This is one of the most difficult ones that I've had to do, basically specifically because of that, because of how arbitrary it can be. And specifically, the thing that I struggled with most coming into this episode was, how do you quantify guys who are, elite scorers but also awesome passers, and specifically the advantage creation that those guys can create that other guys just fundamentally cannot. Advantage creation, scoring ability, and then also the difference in eras in basketball are the things that I struggled with most. So I'm going to try my best to not punish players for lack of scoring ability, and I'm going to try my best to not reward players for being elite scorers. But I also mentioned difference in eras. And I think that's important, too, because you go back and you watch games from, like, the 80s and 90s, and there's a lot of structured plays, right? NBA teams running offenses where, they're getting into their actions. And I'm not saying NBA teams don't do this, but it's way more common where, say, for example, a John Stockton will kick the rock to somebody at the mid-range, and he'll get into a little mid-range pull-up off of a jab step and hit a shot, and it's like, you're going to see more guys from that era that are pass first, and they may have padded assist numbers. And it's like, I was talking to my dad about this last night. It's like, we're not doing a ranking of who's top 10 in assists per game all the time. Because, like, if you want to do a list like that, we could just do a trivia video, right? So that is an important thing to mention. My criteria, I tried to boil this down into tangible things that we could debate and talk about. The thing I value above more so than anything else is basketball IQ. Basketball IQ in decision-making. After that, court vision and awareness. After that, technical passing ability. And then I would say your ability to mitigate mistakes. And then finally, I would say I am going to reward guys on this list who are a little bit more flashy, creative, and audacious. I like that. Again, I think this is so open to interpretation. I almost don't even want to argue these. I just want to have an open source kind of debate. Like, again, we can get into it, but I don't think it should be heated the way a scoring debate.
No, it's going to be heated. No, it's going to be heated. I'm going to rip your ass apart, buddy.
Pause. Hey, yo.
I meant
Y'all
what
heard
I said.
that. Y'all heard that.
I meant what I said.
Finally, I will say this is where it gets a little bit more complicated and murky with the scoring aspect of it. I think I'm going to reward guys who are a little bit more fundamentally selfless. And some people may not, but that's my criteria. Passing, the reason I agonized over this so much, one is because of how arbitrary it can be, but passing is my favorite aspect of every single sport. Basketball is my favorite thing to watch. I love playmaking. I love teammates setting each other up. It is my favorite thing in basketball. And so I thought long and hard about this. I may change my mind mid-episode, guys. I don't know. Like, this was one of the most difficult lists we've had to make, but I'm very excited about this. That being said, where do you differ in your criteria? Do you look at this in an entirely different direction? What are you looking at when gauging the best passers?
It sounds like we have pretty different criteria because pretty much whenever we do a list, Logan, I am an impact relative to era truther. That is pretty much always my fundamental criteria. So for a list like this, my judgments are all based on these players' passing value at their peak. I want to clarify that too. Passing is sort of weird in this way again, where you don't often associate like a passing peak with a player as you do maybe a scoring peak, where scoring you can have sort of more obvious progression and regression. It's probably more of a smoothed curve over a career with passing. Nevertheless, I do think we have to make this distinction because there are certain players whose career passing statistics are obviously going to be buoyed by longevity. That's just not really what interests me in this conversation. And by the way, that's going to be the theme for all of these lists. This is why I like talking about peak more than a bottom line ranking that factors in longevity. Of course, longevity matters, but I think the most interesting basketball conversations come when we purely focus on ability and we aren't factoring in, okay, how long did you do it for? We're just looking at, okay, apples to apples, you at your best versus this guy at his best. Who was delivering more value within the context of their time? That is my criteria here. So this list is not based on pure technical passing ability. It is not based on flashy passing ability. It is not based on assist numbers. And again, it is absolutely not about total career assist numbers at all, because I'm looking at the best, whatever it may be, 3-5 seasons. I'm not going to go with like as strict a definition of a peak here as I have for some other lists, because I do think you can be a little bit more fluid with that. But generally, when a player was at their best, who was able to create the most valuable plays for others? That is what I'm basing this on, your ability to do that specifically as a passer. And that is going to be a combination of decision-making, vision, size, technical passing skill, and this is a very important distinction, it sounds like, between your list and mine, absolutely your ability to threaten the defense, to draw defensive attention, to then create plays for others. I just think your scoring threat and your passing value are so interrelated that I don't want to separate the two, because again, that ability to threaten the defense is so crucial to actually creating value as a passer. I'll use an example. Think about a guy like Lonzo Ball, who is incapable of threatening the defense as a scorer. But if you drop the perfect action, okay, let's say that you're able to draw something up where you get a cutting big and Lonzo has to make a pinpoint lob from the top of the key 25 feet out, absolutely he can do that. And he can do that just about as well as anybody to play this game. But how many opportunities are going to arise in a game over the course of a season where he has that chance? And how many other things have to go right around him that he doesn't have control over for him to be able to make that pass? He is not creating the opportunity. He may be able to perfectly hit a guy in his spot when the opportunity is there, and that is totally part of the value that you deliver as a passer. But I do think what sets the greats apart is their ability to bend the defense themselves, to create windows, to capitalize on windows that other players couldn't. And so that's how I'm viewing this. It's that holistic passing value. Really, if I were going to try to boil it down to like one term, I would say that this list is basically my top 10 playmaking passers. It's not my top 10 playmakers purely. I wish it could be that simple, but it's not, because that would measure your ability to create shots for your teammates in any way. That would factor in things other than passing, like the off-ball gravity of a Steph Curry, the scoring gravity of a Michael Jordan, right? Those guys would absolutely be on my top 10 playmakers list. They are not among my top 10 playmaking passers, though. So that's the best explanation I think that I can give. I think it'll continue to make more sense as you see the sort of players who I am valuing and as I explain the reasons for that. And again, as always, my assessment is relative to the league at the time. That is how I do every single list. The only exception is pre-Bill Russell. I do assess attacks because I think the league was in such its nascent stage. The league was, frankly, pretty much segregated for a period of that time. I just don't value it as much as everything, basically starting with the 60s and beyond. With all that being said, Logan, I have so many honorable mentions for this list. It is ridiculous. Why don't you get us started And if we have a guy in common, maybe we can just share a few words back and forth, because I assume we're going to have a lot of overlap here with these honorable mentions.
I mean, I'll keep it a buck. I don't have a guy in my 10 spot yet because I don't know who the hell I want to put in here. I'm going to make a game time decision on one of these guys to slide them into my 10 spot. And I will say, I think your criteria is more easily able to be debated and tangible, and I like that aspect of it. What made it complicated for me is, again, the scoring, passing, crossover, and it kind of hurt my brain to do it like that. So I decided not to.
I get it. You're trying to isolate passing as a skill as much as you can. My take is that's just not how basketball actually works, right? It's like when we're going to do our top 10 shooters list at some point. Well, I think absolutely you 100% have to factor in off the dribble shooting ability, right? Which is now going to incorporate some level of ball handling skill and functional athleticism.
Dude, and that's what's also hard. Like, judging guys with different archetypes in this category too, because you're going to have fundamentally different passes available to you based on ball handling ability. That's another cross section of passing in this.
But the
debate
reason
that we're doing today.
I think this is right is basketball is not an exercise where you try to put a pass in one specific spot with accuracy and timing and some sort of like stagnant competition, right? It is a game where all of these components are interrelated. So that's where I come back again to your passing, playmaking value. That's just what makes the most sense to me. So with all that being said, who is your first honorable mention?
Some of these guys may sound crazy that I'm even debating them potentially not being on my list. The three guys that I'm really debating for this final spot, four guys really, no lie, my gut wants to get Mark Jackson on this list in my 10 spot. Mark Jackson's just a freak. Like, he was doing stuff watching back tape that I've never seen
about
before.
What he said about Savannah James. You're talking about the basketball. Right.
It's really sad that overshadows anything he did on the court, man. Anybody thinks of Mark Jackson and they go, I'd hit that out of the park respectfully. Respectfully, Mark, you can't say that respectfully.
It's a remarkable quote. It's a remarkable quote, and it is his legacy.
He is such an awesome watch. He has done stuff that I've never seen replicated, specifically when he was young with the Knicks and on the Pacers. I mean, he was always productive and always a great decision maker and risk mitigator, even into Denver. Like, he's a really fun watch. I don't think he's going to make my list. The other guys that are really close, and again, it may sound crazy that I'm debating them here, Luka Doncic and James Harden both. This is where the selflessness and the risk mitigation come into play more so than anything else. I think that Harden's brilliant. Harden is a basketball genius, and that's why I think he probably is going to be the guy in my 10 spot. He is a brilliant decision maker. I honestly think his passing peak may be after his scoring peak with Houston because he's matured and grown and become more selfless. And so, again, I know our list may be different in where his exact peak is, but I think he's grown as a decision maker, and his mastery of the game has only gotten better with age. And I think Harden probably will be the guy that slides into this 10 spot for me. Luka, again, he's such an elite scorer, but my hang-up with him is that he is very turnover prone, that sometimes he can be a little bit more reckless with the ball. He isn't a fundamentally selfless player. But with that, Luka draws so much defensive attention that he has to make passes that nobody else can. And that is sort of this balancing act that I'm doing. I do have some more honorable mentions. The other guy that I do feel like I need to mention, Andre Miller was another really close cut for me in terms of just being a great decision maker, risk mitigator, and fundamentally selfless, man. I have a real soft spot in my heart for guys like that. I know that archetype is going out of the way, but I just love it, man. A guy who's looking to set his teammates up, looking for the best shot, always looking to make the best decision, and I really value that heavily. So those were the first handful of guys off my list. But like I said, I think Harden's probably going to be in my 10 spot.
That's really interesting because you almost just represented like the two polar opposite archetypes that could be on your list there. You have the true pass-first point guards of old, and then you have the two incredible volume scorers who are also elite passers, of course, but so much of their value comes from their ability to stress and reshape a defense with their scoring threat first. I'll address the Mark Jacksons and Andre Millers of the world first. I think pretty clearly with my criteria. I don't even really consider guys like that. The guy who I was going to mention, and I assume he will be on your list because with your criteria, I think he belongs. If you're just talking about, like, I know you said it's not pure technical passing ability, but it's closer to that, much closer to that than what my list is, which is, again, passing, playmaking value. Rajon Rondo is kind of like the antithesis of my criteria, where if you're looking at pure passing ability, if you say top 10 passers ever, I think a lot of people think of Rondo, and understandably so. If you say top 10 playmakers ever or top 10 passing playmakers ever, I think far fewer people would, because so much of his passing is about that pure technical ability, right? The pinpoint accuracy that he does have. At times, the creativity, absolutely, but he was always limited in terms of his playmaking value by the fact that he was such a limited scorer. And that's why all the guys on my list, they could buoy an offense with their playmaking value. Like, they were all gifted scorers, which again enhances their passing playmaking value, but they could drive really good team offenses all to varying degrees. Rajon Rondo simply flat out never could have done that. And the reason for that is because he had so many issues as a scorer that ultimately limited what he could even do as a creator for others. So when it comes to, again, creating plays for others as a passer, which is my criteria, I just don't think that Rondo compares. So the same would go for Mark Jackson. The same would go for Andre Miller. Luke and Harden, two of my three toughest cuts. So they're also both off my list, or maybe one of them will end up on your list. Luka's the guy who I thought was going to be here, and then I just got to 10 names, and he was the odd man out. He has some very obvious superpowers as a passer. He is one of the best pick-and-roll passers ever. He is specifically, I would say, a top 2 skip passer in NBA history, just him and LeBron James. And if you just give him a vertical spacing big, a lob threat, you give him a bunch of shooters, and you give him a million ball screens a game, he can pretty much spoon feed teammates good shots, and he can pretty much lead to elite team offense. What he did, if we look back to 2020 when he led the number 1 offense in the NBA, pretty much with that formula, it's a testament to how he does create really high value shots for his teammates. That being said, we're nitpicking at an extremely high level here. And I do think when you compare him to some of the other guys who are on my list, it is relatively easy to limit Luka's playmaking impact. And I think there's some evidence for that. If you look at some tactics we've seen deployed against him in recent years, specifically in postseason runs. If you think about the Celtics final series, if you think about the Timberwolves series last year, when he runs into very switch-heavy defenses, his passing value diminishes significantly. He becomes much more reliant on trying to beat teams as a scorer in that setting with this very isolation-heavy style. So much of his playmaking is interrelated with the pick-and-roll reads that are available to him against more conventional coverages, and if you force him to beat you outside of pick and roll like that, he can still do it, but he's going to do it much more so as a scorer than as a passer. So last 3 playoff runs, he's at just 7.2 assists per game. And then you factor in, like you said, the high turnover numbers. Obviously, it goes without saying, Luka is an elite passer. There are certain passes he can make that I think only a couple guys in the history of this game can. But I do think he has more of a score-first style when you come to the playoffs. That is in part because he can be induced into that schematically. And so that does mean that playoff passing value, in my opinion, doesn't stack up to the guys who did make the end of my list. Harden, there's a lot of similarities. I think Harden is also one of the best pick and roll passers ever. He is a GOAT level pocket passer, lob passer. His timing with rollers is up there for the best I've ever seen. He is fantastic as a passer in that way. And he's honestly still so close. I just think the playoff playmaking isn't quite there. Again, I think this is a guy who can be induced into more of a score-first style in those settings. If you look at the last decade, okay, and that's a big sample size. In the regular season, Harden is a 9.2 assists per game guy. In the playoffs, he's a 7.9 assists per game guy. So there's been just enough of a drop-off there. We usually think about the playoff scoring dropping with Harden, right? If it's because defenses can adjust somewhat to his tendencies over the course of a 7-game series, physicality ramps up, he's not getting the same whistle. But I think, as notably, his playmaking value hasn't quite been the same in those settings.
You might have just talked me into it, man. I mean, I'm debating. This is such a hard list.
I feel like I just talked you out of everybody. I feel like I argued why I didn't have any of them on there.
No, but there is one guy that I feel like I'm overlooking a little bit. Maybe it's just my pure era bias.
Okay. Is it the Houdini of the hardwood?
It's not.
Oh.
No, I'm going to do it. I am going to bump Harden off. There is one guy that I would just feel bad in my gut if I didn't have this guy on here. And I need to be based. I need to respect all basketball eras. I cannot be ageist, so I will get this guy on here. I'll let the cat out of the bag. He's not super high on my list, but I do have Rondo on my list. If you wouldn't have him here, look, man, I'm a sucker for a pretty pass. Like, and Rondo's nasty, and young Rondo did have some skills. We'll get into that in a little bit. The other couple of guys that I really considered, I think a lot of people would have Isaiah Thomas on their list.
Yeah.
I don't have Isaiah Thomas on my list, and he was a tough cut. He's really creative. Again, some of those similar turnover issues, I feel, and I don't ever feel like he let out elite offenses the way some of these other guys did, and that does matter a little bit to me. The other two guys, and I feel like they're more creative and audacious than Pistol Pete, I feel like, can kind of get overrated as a playmaker sometimes. He's definitely, certainly ahead of his time, and like the highlights will wow you, but I feel like on like a possession-to-possession basis, it's not there. It's like when people will throw it. I'm not saying this to disrespect Pete Maravich, but in this conversation, it's like when people will throw out Jason Williams, and it's like, look, man, the highlights are fucking ridiculous.
It's pure flash.
It really is. The one guy that isn't going to have the assist numbers that I did consider is Manu Ginobili. And I think Manu was a wizard. And because he came off the bench and because he was so selfless and was willing to sacrifice his role for the betterment of the team, I feel like can kind of just get overlooked as a player fundamentally. Manu's one of my favorite players ever. Crafty lefty. Could do everything on the basketball court. He was one of my toughest cuts just because, I mean, he's so much fun to watch. He's so smart, such a good decision maker. And he's, like, when we're talking about audacious, like the epitome of flashy. And Manu was one of my real toughest cuts on this list.
Dude, I always love a Manu shout. I'm a Manu truther. I think the guy was just incredible and so damn impactful. I've said I think he was better than Tony Parker on those Spurs teams at his best. And like you said, the creativity, the willingness to be inventive, and overall, like, that really paid off for him as a passer. And just some of the angles he could find, the velocity. He was great. I couldn't find a top 10 spot for him. The bar is just too high, but I think he's worthy of a top 25 shout or something like that. And I do think he's a much better passer than, like, Pistol Pete. And this is where, again, I'm going to hammer home the criteria even more. It's about the passing value that you deliver. So Pistol Pete, for his time, doing crazy shit with the basketball, doing crazy shit as a passer. Ultimately, though, the decision-making with him was pretty nuts. The dial was turned way, way too high towards let me try to take the craziest shot that I can, and, like, just ultimately made him a not-so-efficient offensive player and made it so that his passing value wasn't nearly what it could have been if he maybe had those knobs turned a bit more correctly. So I didn't consider him at all for this list. I think he's worth mentioning, though, because, as you're saying, like, criteria can differ so much here. Isaiah Thomas, another one of my absolute toughest cuts. Like, boy, I wanted to get him on this list. 84 to 87, he was giving you 11.5 assists per game in the regular season, over 10 assists a game in the playoffs, and that was really when Zeke was at his best. That's not when the Pistons win at all, but that's because they had a stronger roster when you look at the teams from 88 to 90. Like, this is when Isaiah was at his best as a scorer and playmaker, in my opinion. Just the speed, the ability to create penetration, the creativity as an interior passer. He engineered, like, a bunch of top 10 offenses at this time, one number one offense, because of the ability to do that. And he was also one of the greatest ball handlers of all time, which again feeds into that ability to get into the paint and create opportunities for others. Like, really the only thing that I can say about Zeke is I just don't think he delivered quite as much value there as the guys who I have in my top 10. Like, there's not really a criticism. I just barely left him off. And I'll talk about that a little more maybe in relation to the guy who is in my 10 spot, because they were sort of peers. I know that you're going to have this guy on your list, so I don't even think I want to mention him at this point, because in terms of pure technical passing ability, not only would this guy 100% be on the list, he'd be top 5. Like, he was a wizard as a passer with the basketball. So I'm just going to leave that for now.
Wow.
And we'll get back to that later.
I think I probably know who you're talking about.
You probably do based on my criteria, but we'll save that conversation for later. I do have as an honorable mention Bob Cousy, the Houdini of the hardwood. I mean, he was clearly the best of his time. And, like, it is pretty funny, dude. He was doing stuff that, like, nobody else would think to attempt. It looks a little goofy when you look back at it. He does, like, a pass fake and then just, like, drops the ball behind him over his head. And you're like, who was that really fooling? Probably nobody, but I mean, he was leading the league in assists like every year. It's just, I do institute the pre-Russell era basketball tax, and the top 10 is just too strong. So that's my one exception to the pure relative to era. I do have a modern guy on here, Logan, as an honorable mention. Trae Young, I think, is just flat out one of the best interior passers, one of the best pick and roll passers, one of the best lob passers, one of the best passers at his size, the range he has as a passer, considering what a small guard he is. Ultimately, not quite top 10 value. I think some of the same criticisms about diminishing passing value in the playoffs. I mean, if he goes up against the switching defense, he's just kind of cooked overall as a scorer and a passer. High turnover numbers. I couldn't get him on, but he's worthy of a mention. I'll give you one that, I don't know if you thought of this guy. I wanted desperately to find a way to get him on the list. It was never going to happen, but I had to give him an honorable mention. Rick Barry. I just think he is clearly the best passing forward ever, not named LeBron or Bird. And I think so often we think of him as a scorer first because this is a guy who averaged 35 points per game, right, in the 1967 season. But when I think about Rick Barry's peak, which is those mid-70s years, 74 to 77, when he's making the Warriors like a top 2 offense every year, and of course he has the title run, I really think it was his passing first that fueled those elite offenses. I think he was really a visionary. I think he was super aggressive. He was pinpoint accurate. He could ramp up the velocity. He was like kind of the father of the jump pass as we know it, at least with the rate at which he utilized it. I just think every time you watch a game from that era, Rick Barry's passing jumps off the screen, more so even than his scoring. Again, I don't think the passing volume is quite there for him to be on this list because he was normally like a 6 assists per game kind of guy, but boy, were they a valuable 6 assists per game.
My final thing I want to mention before we get into the list, I have called a little
I'm not done with my honorable mentions, by the way, but go ahead.
I am going to call a little bit of an audible. I think one thing I should mention, too, I think if I'm struggling to pick between guys, again, because we really are splitting hairs here.
Yeah.
I'm going to lean on the guy who I think was more like irreplaceable to his offense and like did it. Like if I am struggling like with one, I think I will lean on the total value a little bit more on certain guys. But man, I cannot believe you left one guy off this list. And like I understand with your criteria why he's not going to be here. I understand it in my stomach, but like when I think of passing, I think of that guy.
No, I get it.
You know?
No, I get it. It's hilarious that you already know 100% who it is, and I really think you do. That being said, before we get into the top 10, I have 3 more honorable mentions. Russell Westbrook. I think by your criteria, he doesn't really sniff the list when it comes to like not being a brilliant processor,
It's
not
more,
being super
that's
creative. However,
it's more IQ in just general decision making. I'm not saying that Russ wasn't. You know, it's just I've seen too many boneheaded plays from Russ that omit him from this list.
I get it. And again, he's not on my list. He's one of my last few honorable mentions here. But when I think about passing value, there has not been a better rim pressuring guard in the history of this game than Russell Westbrook. And so the sheer passing opportunities that opened up for him that didn't always have to be advanced, super sexy reads, like just the kick out passes because of all the pressure that he was putting on the rim. There's a reason this guy was kind of a walking double-digit assist player for so long. I think that rim pressure is really the driving factor there, and that value alone gets him an honorable mention. And then my last 2, kind of cheeky, Tim Hardaway, just shout out. I think at his peak with the Run TMC Warriors, 91 to 93, really an elite volume passer, leading really good team offenses while averaging 10 assists per game. And then this guy, I'm not going to lie to you, there was a moment where I thought, by my criteria, which is purely peak based, your best few seasons as a passer, should this guy be on here? I couldn't get there, but he definitely deserves a mention. Darren Williams. I think it's easy to forget, but his passing fueled 4 straight top 8 offenses in Utah, including a number 1 offense, a top 3 offense. he was truly one of the brilliant playmaking passers of his time and of all time. At the end of the day, the bar is just a little bit too high to get on this list. So that's a light 30 minutes or so on criteria and honorable mentions. I'm not surprised at all, Logan. There's no shot clock on this podcast. We're just going to have fun, and we're going to talk about the greatest passers to ever play. Who is in your 10 spot?
So I have called a little bit of an audible. I've moved Rajon Rondo down to my 10 spot.
Okay.
Rajon, my mama just made that shit up, Rondo. Such a crafty bastard, man. Oh, my gosh. Sure. Like, Rondo is one of the greatest technical passers I've ever seen. If we were just basing it off accuracy, like, hell, man. Rondo, Andre Miller, like, those guys would be locks. But, again, with my criteria and the things that I value for this list, Rondo's just one of the highest IQ guys I've ever seen. The court vision, the awareness, his ability to not turn the ball over, elite decision-making, and his flash. I would have felt bad leaving Rondo off this list. Like, when I think of brilliance there, he had to be here. And you're mentioning some of these scoring issues. I actually think that became more of a thing about Rondo as he got older and he lost that athleticism, because young Rondo could get downhill and get to the rim, and that's where he would create some of these opportunities for his teammates. Young Rondo wasn't getting burned, but when he did break onto the scene for Boston from the 2009 season to 2013, when he still had, that ability to really hit the gas and get all the way downhill, that's when you saw him shine. The reason that Rondo isn't higher on my list is a little bit because of the scoring issues that you see. Everybody basically, not everybody, most of the guys higher on my list are just fundamentally better scorers. But peak Rondo also had a great team around him, right? Like, he just had a lot of good play finishers. If it was Paul Pierce, if it was Ray Allen, if it was Kevin Garnett, I do think you see his value diminish as he loses those guys around him and he doesn't have those kind of elite scoring talents with him. And as he gets older, you see his scoring ability limit how effective he could be as an offensive player. I do think it's important to mention one of the toughest things that I struggled with in this was the era difference. Because if you drop a guy like Rajon Rondo in the 1990s, he's probably one of the best point guards in the NBA, bar none, right? Like, just because of how the game was played back then, where that archetype was just more valuable. We talk about this all the time on the show, Carson. That archetype is extinct in the modern NBA. And that's one of the most important things that we need to mention. Again, I know our criteria is different, but the era difference is so important with Rondo. But when we're talking about technical passing ability, basketball IQ, the ability to protect the basketball, again, these are the things that I think I value most highly when I was making this list. I couldn't leave Rondo off. I think Rondo is one of the smartest players I've ever seen play the game.
Absolutely.
One of the best court mapping of any player. Again, these things on the margins are why I'm not going to have Rondo higher on my list, but brilliant. Rondo's one of the smartest guys I've ever seen play the game, one of the best technical passers, and audacious. Again, I love audacity. I love the guys that are willing to make that sexy, flashy play. At the end of the day, this is my list. I know we're going to have differences. I was going to feel wrong in my gut if I left Rondo off this list, so that's why he's here.
Yeah, I get the difference in criteria, and I'm definitely with you on pretty much everything you praised Rondo for, but I do disagree with a couple things. Audacious wouldn't be the first word that I would use to describe Rondo when we're talking about him up against the great passers, and I think part of that is he didn't have the opportunities to be audacious that guys who can actually break down a defense and get into the paint and start making some of those tight window passes do.
Full speed, coming downhill, getting in the air, kicking out to somebody in the corner.
He's a great passer. I'm talking about when we're measuring him up against the great passers who we are talking about today. I do think there's a reason that the great Ben Taylor of Thinking Basketball literally coined the term Rondo assist when talking about those more routine, lower value assists, right? The difference between somebody who is finding a teammate in his spot, somebody who is not creating the offense, and then somebody like some of the true great playmakers, a Magic Johnson, a Steve Nash, whoever, who is very much so the driving force of creating the shot for a teammate. And again, this just comes down to a fundamental difference in criteria where I am valuing your playmaking value, the quality of shots that you're creating for your teammates. And that's where I just think Rondo never had the ability as an overall offensive player to compare to these other guys. And you talk about the death of this archetype, like Rondo literally witnessed it in real time. Rondo was one of the guys who was played out of a starting role basically because the league shifted to the point where there had always been guards who could blend great scoring and playmaking. Like all of the guards who are on my list could do that. However, the number of guys in terms of guards who could really do that in the late 2010s was higher than it ever had been before. And that obviously has remained the case into the 2020s, and the entire point guard position has just fundamentally changed, where now it pretty much means lead ball handler who can threaten the defense as a scorer and also make plays. Scoring value is a prerequisite to be handed the keys to an offense as a point guard in a way that it wasn't when Rondo came into the league and before. But Rondo's scoring limitations did always hold him back as a player. And there's a reason if you look at Rondo's best years, right? 2010 to 2014, the Celtics were bad offensively with him on the court. They were bad offensively with him off the court too, but a below average offense, -1 relative offense over those years. That's a big sample size. Yes, he could get into the paint with his quickness. He was a bad finisher though, bad efficiency around the rim, bad touch shot maker, and obviously a horrific jump shooter. And just the fact that defenses were able to give him so much space on the perimeter limited his ability still to get into the paint and create plays for others. So those are all the reasons that I have Rondo off my list. If you're talking top 10 pure technical passers, yeah, I think that he does belong. And also IQ, he was brilliant. It's just there's only so much you can do to enhance those around you and create those high value assists if you can't threaten the defense as a scorer.
Yeah, I agree. And the game has just fundamentally changed. That's why I think that everything we're saying, it all matters. What I will give Rondo props for is how he was still able to be productive late in his career with that Lakers squad and win a championship. Like Rondo's IQ even there, I just think Rondo's so smart. And I really value basketball IQ and high-level decision-making, and that's one of the biggest things for me on this list. Along with just actual technical passing ability. I do want to give Rondo props for, even despite all of these flaws, the archetype going extinct, Rondo, even in the late stage of his career, found a way to be productive on a winning team and won another championship. And I just love him, man. I know he's got the scoring limitations, but I got a soft spot in my heart for Rondo.
I get it. In my 10 spot, I have somebody who I do not have a soft spot in my heart for, and this is probably going to be pretty controversial, although I promise my ranking of him here has nothing to do with anything personal. This is genuinely my belief on where he belongs given my criteria. I have John Stockton in my 10 spot. And Stockton is a really interesting player to talk about here because as we are talking about all the reasons that I am lower on Rondo as a passer, lower on somebody else who I guess shall not be named until we get to that point where he's on your list, Stockton has similarities to those guys, but I think he's probably somewhere like halfway between a Rondo and a Chris Paul when it comes to the fact that absolutely so much of Stockton's assist production came from routine passes, specifically to Karl Malone. But this is why I know it's going to be controversial. John Stockton is the all-time assist leader. It's not close. If you look at the stretch that I'm looking at, I do really believe that Stockton peaked young because he simply had more of a scoring threat to leverage at that time. He was really quick at that age, so he could at least do more getting into the paint and actually creating opportunities for others. So if we look at like 88 to 92, I mean, the guy was 14 assists per game in the regular season, 14 assists a game in the playoffs. The production is outstanding. But again, it all comes down to how much are you actually creating for those around you? And that's where I just don't think that Stockton measures up to everybody who's higher than him on my list. I will give him his props. I mean, he's still in my top 10, right? He was definitely the greatest entry passer ever. He could absolutely find a guy in his spot curling off a down screen as well as anybody ever. He could find a guy off a designed cut. Like, he may have been the best ever at just facilitating a designed action. But again, those aren't high value passes. Those are not the things that are irreplaceable in an offense. They bring some value. They do not bring the most value. And I think if you watch John Stockton, you see So much idle dribbling, so much just waiting for things to develop, waiting for Malone to get post position, waiting for someone to come free off the action. And then, yeah, he makes an accurate, well-timed pass to the player who has gotten open. So again, he is not the one manufacturing the play. Compared to the greats, he just didn't create the opening as much. And Logan, you mentioned this, how the position has changed, right? So maybe a lot of people are like, okay, but that's just how point guards operated in the 80s and 90s. They were facilitators whose primary job was to get the offense arranged and set and find a player in their spot. But there are several dudes who are on this list from Stockton's era who disprove that notion. When you look at the best of the best, again, that sort of archetype, that pure point guard, absolutely more prevalent back then, no question. The game has changed. But if you watch a John Stockton 18 assist game and you watch a Magic Johnson 18 assist game, you watch a Kevin Johnson 18 assist game, like there is a dramatic difference in how the Johnsons are, again, breaking down the defense, threatening them as a scorer, creating the opportunities versus Stockton, who is more so giving you some of those lower value, more routine assists. So again, he's a great passer. His vision was very good. It wasn't visionary though, right? Like he wasn't super aggressive. He wasn't testing the tightest of windows. He didn't have like superhuman processing. He wasn't somebody who made super quick split second great decisions in traffic. And overall, even when he was young and he was faster so he could get into the paint more, he didn't really like to play in the paint because he was so small. He could be bothered by size as a scorer and a passer, and his size overall limited the number of advanced passes that were available to him because, I mean, he literally didn't have the physical ability. He didn't have the vision. He didn't have the angles. He didn't have the length to make some of these passes. So those are the knocks on Stockton. And then also, it really matters to me, again, that your passing was fueling great team offense. And Stockton's passing wasn't the driving force of elite team offense. The Jazz had elite team offenses in the mid to late 90s, absolutely, year after year. But Karl Malone deserves the most credit for that because of just his relentless scoring value. And then I think the huge thing that changes for the Jazz in the mid 90s that doesn't get talked about enough is Jeff Hornacek. Like, before the early 90s, the Jazz had a lot of mediocre offenses. From 88 to 92, this stretch where I think Stockton was at his best, they had one top 10 offense. They had a couple of below average offenses. And again, I just think the true GOATs above him, the true best playmaking passers, they drove elite team offense in a way that Stockton wasn't in that stretch. But again, 1995 is when Utah's run of elite team offense starts. That's Jeff Hornacek's first full season with the team. And I think Hornacek is one of the most underrated offensive players ever, one of the best shooters at the time, an underratedly great passer and super high field player. Like, I think that was truly a big three. And I think too often people just make it Stockton Malone. And I get it because they played together for almost 20 years and Hornacek just came in the mid 90s, but he came in and he took them to another level. He took them from decent playoff team to, hey, we're in the finals twice. We're winning 64 games, what have you. So I am definitely low on Stockton's passing. I understand that. I still have him here, though, and the reason I do have him here, because I think with my criteria, some people might be thinking, hold on, but don't Luka, Harden surpass him as playmakers? And I actually still don't think so, because I give Stockton a lot of credit for how much he sustained his passing value in the playoffs. Like, the fact that he was still delivering 14 assists per game in those settings is pretty outstanding, especially when you look at guys like Luka, Harden, Trae Young, where depending on the series, depending on the matchup, you may be able to like really cut into their passing production where now they're giving you 6 assists a game or whatever, and that value diminishes. With Stockton, it held up in the playoffs in a pretty unique, like special way. And I do think I really debated him versus Zeke because I do prefer Zeke's style as a passer. Again, I do view him as more of a creator, but I think the playoff passing value from Stockton gives him the slight edge over Isaiah, although I have mixed feelings about that. So this is where I land on Stockton. The numbers obviously are outstanding. I think there's a lot of context that needs to be applied there that makes his passing, specifically at his peak when we don't factor in longevity, not as great as the numbers would suggest, but I mean, nevertheless, in my top 10.
This will flow nicely. Stockton's in my 9 spot, and that may surprise a lot of people, too, with some of my criteria. Like you mentioned, he's number 1 in career assists. He's number 1 and number 2 in single-season assists per game. The thing that I want to hammer home about Stockton, though, I think Stockton may be the best decision maker I've ever seen. And I get what you're saying about it's not the most valuable thing, but he's such a stabilizing force in those Utah offenses. Like, when I was watching back and watching clips from old Stockton games, I mean, it is just great decision after great decision after great decision. Like, so I think maybe the best decision maker ever. And that's why I debated him. And I mean that in terms of limiting risk, risk-reward, finding that balance, not wasting the possession, finding a guy in his spot. And that's why I debated having Stockton all the way up to 5 on my list. And then I went into some of the other areas, and I'm like, well, one, Stockton doesn't throw as many sexy passes as some of these other guys, and that does matter a little bit to me. But also, more importantly, like, a lot of it is play-driven, where, like you're saying, it's Malone finding an open space, and the back screen on the left block is what ultimately opened up Malone for the layup, right? Stockton just threw the ball to a wide open guy.
Right.
Or
Jerry Sloan never gets enough credit. I mean, he was truly brilliant. And like the principles that he was able to blend of being ahead of the curve with pick and roll and then sort of merging that with his flex offense, like he was drawing up probably the best stuff in the NBA at that time. And so, like you said, a lot of this was just trust the action. Trust the guy is going to come open, get him his spot. It's sort of like when we talk about a quarterback, right? And you have those guys who are anticipation passers, which is a good thing when things are going great on structure.
But like you said, it's not the most valuable thing.
Right. And at some point, I need you to actually be able to create something. Because we're not just talking about sexy passes here, okay? Because I know that's what the Stockton truthers are going to say. They're going to say, oh, who cares about the sexiness of the pass? Like, let me put it as simply as I can. If I have Steve Nash, he can spoon feed his teammates assists right at the rim over and over again throughout the course of a game. When he creates an open shot for his teammate at the rim, that is absolutely more valuable than when John Stockton finds an open teammate for a mid-range look at the elbows, right? You are talking about one guy who is creating the play and it's an 80% shot for a teammate versus one guy who is facilitating the play and it's a 40-something 50% shot for his teammate. I'm going to try not to just reiterate my criteria. I just think it's important to really clarify, right? I'm not talking about flash. Like, we are talking about substance here. There is a fundamental difference between how some assists are tallied and other assists.
Well said. I completely agree. And that is one of the limiting factors on why Stockton isn't, all the way up on this list. Again, I am factoring a little bit of sexiness in my passing, but that's not the biggest knock. The biggest knock is that going back and rewatching this games, sure, Stockton can hit a wide open guy in the mid-range, and then he's going to pivot and set his feet face up to the basket and hit the jumper. What the hell did Stockton do? He just threw the entry pass. Like, not all assists are created equally, and that's the most important thing that we need to keep in context here. I'm not going to keep belaboring these points. I think you said it really well, Carson. It's not the most valuable thing you can do. That being said, why Stockton is still going to make this list is because he does bring valuable things to the offense. The decision-making, like I mentioned, being able to protect the ball and doing it over and over and over again repeatedly, that is valuable. It's not the most valuable thing. I do want to give him credit. Pinpoint accurate on some of these cuts. I think that, like I mentioned, I think he may be the best decision maker in terms of being able to mitigate risk of all time, as well as, God, I mean, he can just put it in your pocket on cuts. Watching him hit cutters is a thing of beauty. I really enjoyed going back and watching Stockton. He's a great bailout and kick-out passer, too. Hitting guys in stride, like I mentioned, great at protecting the basketball. But again, the reason that he's not higher on this list is because I don't think it is the most valuable thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And he's not driving some of these elite kind of offenses the way some of these other guys may have. That's not the be-all, end-all for my criteria, but it is a limiting factor for why Stockton isn't higher on my list. So he's at number 9 for me.
And I want to be clear, obviously, we're being kind of critical of Stockton's case here, but I think that's just to explain why we're not as high on him as probably the consensus. But I do want to say, as I said earlier, like, he is not the epitome of the idle dribbling, like, not really creating value. Like, to me, no hate, that is Rajon Rondo. Stockton, again, he is somewhere between a Rondo and a Chris Paul, but he has more of those routine assists. That accounts for a larger percentage of his assists than it does anybody else on my list, anybody else I even really considered for my list. But there were ways in which, again, he could get into the teeth of the defense at times with his quickness. He could make plays in transition. He was a very good pick and roll passer, and he was an elite jump shooter. He was a very efficient scorer, and he had a very pass first mindset. But if we get into one more nuanced difference between like him and a Steve Nash, because I think sometimes people look at like the bottom line counting stats and they're pretty similar, and both players were very efficient too, but there's a reason that Nash was a driving factor in so many of the greatest offenses ever. And again, Stockton led a number of mediocre offenses before really the totality of the team came together to form this elite offense that still never reached the heights of Nash's Suns or even Nash and Dirk with the Mavs. But it's just like so much of passing value, in my opinion, also comes down to your ability to make lightning quick decisions as you leverage your scoring threat. Okay, like Steve Nash, he was going to cause the defense to panic basically because okay, he can get to a 50+% mid-range shot. He can get to a 40+% three-point, like whatever he can get to as a scorer is incredibly lethal and efficient. He's so quick, he can get downhill and threaten us with the rim finishing, with the floater game. You're worried about that at all times. He's got the ball in a string. He's probing. And at some point, he's going to force you to make a decision, and he's going to manipulate you, and probably whatever you're worried about him doing, he's going to do the opposite. So it's either a really efficient shot that he gets up for himself or a really efficient shot that he creates for a teammate. And part of how he did that was just by being super aggressive in leveraging his strengths. Stockton just wasn't aggressive. He just wasn't. It was more so, okay, I don't quite want to try that pass. That feels a little risky. So let's just reset the offense. And there's value in diminishing turnovers, suppressing turnovers. Stockton is great, but I just want to, again, hammer home the difference between him and the best of the best, in my opinion, and why he winds up at number 10 on my list. That's a lot on John Stockton. Hopefully we'll go faster going forward. That being said, my number 9 spot, I think, is maybe going to be the most controversial guy I have on this list. I have Tyrese Haliburton at number 9, Logan. I think Tyrese Haliburton right now is one of the most valuable passers to ever play this game. And I think he is also one of the most unique passers to consider here because his superpower is truly his decision-making. I think Tyrese Haliburton might be the smartest offensive player ever. Like, genuinely. I don't think that anybody has ever added more value to an offense purely through their basketball IQ than Tyrese Haliburton. Like, the way that he manages a game is so unique because so often when we talk about these floor generals who are able to diminish risk, control the game, whatever, it's a Chris Paul type, okay? Somebody who is absolutely great at that, but is also going to strangle the pace more in the half court, dominate the ball more. Haliburton is somebody who thrives so much when it comes to maximizing every opportunity possible in every conceivable way. He is going to push the pace just about as well as any player to play this game. Like, I think he's a top 5 transition passer ever. He's the best hit-ahead passer in the game today. He will get off the ball so quickly to set into motion the initial advantage that the offense needs. And that's why I don't think that the assist numbers lie more, undersell more any player who we're going to talk about than Tyrese Haliburton. And obviously, the assist numbers are great, but they still don't come close to capturing his offensive value because so much of what he does is like the best opportunistic passing you've ever seen to create an initial advantage. If that is in transition, if that is identifying a mismatch, right? And you can argue some of that stuff is routine passing. And I think what makes Hallie special is he excels at the routine passing, absolutely. But he also takes things a level beyond that where he is a true creator and he's just going to make the right read like every single time. And the ability out of pick and roll to do that while consistently fooling the defense with elite deception, he is just processing the game as fast as anybody to ever play it. Like the ability to identify, okay, they're tagging the roller here, I'm going to hit the skip pass here. Again, maybe that doesn't manifest in an assist, but whatever, it creates an advantage. It creates a closeout attacking opportunity, and maybe it ends up being a hockey assist, or the understanding of, okay, there's just enough of a window for me to get the pass into a roller here. All the while, he's a brilliant jump passer, one of the best ever. He's a brilliant no-look passer, so you never really know where he's going with the basketball. He's going to look you off consistently, really effectively. The ability to make those 0.5 second decisions. I mean, this is something else that sets apart Hallie. He's always controlling the game, but he doesn't have to be on ball all the time to do that, right? He's somebody who can fit in and make some of these incredibly high feel, quick decisions when he just gets the ball within the flow of the offense. That's a unique thing among these great passing point guards. And then he is genuinely the GOAT passer when it comes to limiting turnovers. Like last year, Logan, this guy had a 5.8 assist to turnover ratio, over 9 assists a game, 1.6 turnovers a game. We've never seen anything like that. So he's such a distinct passer and player. I've always been a Hallie Glazer. Like, I just think the box score doesn't capture his value. The aesthetics doesn't capture his value. There's not even necessarily something you point at the skill set that captures his value. So much of it is mindset, decision-making, making the most out of every possession in every possible way. And that's where I think the value is just so monumental. Like, this guy led the NBA's top playoff offense overall over the last 2 years. The Pacers were 4th in regular season offensive rating overall over the last 2 years. And then this season, you take him off the team. Miles Turner is gone too. Absolutely, that matters. But obviously, by far the biggest change in variable is Tyrese Haliburton is gone. And they go from this elite offense to being dead last in offensive rating. Siakam is still out there. Nembhard is still out there. Their best other players have played a lot of basketball this season, and they haven't been able to salvage them from disastrous offense when Hallie consistently made them elite. And it's because of all the little things he does as a passer. Like, he may be the greatest little things passer in the history of this game. So that's where, again, it shows up in the impact. Overall, since 2023, his first full season with Indiana, a +8 offensive on-off swing. That is a monumental difference. So I do believe he's one of the most impactful passers we've ever seen. I think more so than Luka, Harden, Trey, like any of these contemporary guards in my honorable mentions. When I think about the offenses that he's been able to fuel, obviously Luka and Harden, right? They've fueled great offenses, but it's so much more about the balancing of their scoring and passing value, and probably even more so about the scoring value for those guys. With Hallie, it is the passing. It is the Tyrese Haliburton offense that is fueled by playmaking and pace and selflessness that has made the Pacers what they are. So I think he's here. Like, I understand if you're like, okay, but it hasn't been as long as these other guys. Couple years, it's enough for me, just considering how special he is, how desperately they've missed him, the heights he got that offense to. And the only reason he isn't higher is I don't think he quite hits home runs like some of the guys higher up. I mean, once we get into the top 6, top 5 especially, I think we're talking about like a truly, truly special level of passing genius that I think part of it is a different level of scoring threat that allowed them to create more high-quality opportunities for others. But I think that Hallie gets every last drop out of his offensive abilities that he could, and it's made him one of the best offensive players in the NBA.
I love Haliburton Glaze. I love the take. I love Tyrese Haliburton. My soul has been crushed ever since the Sacramento Kings traded him away. Dude, people called me crazy at the time when I called Haliburton a franchise cornerstone. Like,
you cooked.
I think Haliburton's in like the most underappreciated archetype, but he's like the best of it, you know? Like,
yeah.
And I even say archetype. There's nobody like Hallie in the NBA, man. Nobody plays like that in the NBA today. Like, he is so fundamentally unselfish. He always makes the best decision. And the thing that's just so remarkable is I'm talking about risk mitigation. He just never turns the ball over. He never puts the ball in harm's way, and he always makes the right decision. You're talking about the assist numbers underselling him. You know, the guy's led the league in assists before. I completely agree. Like, Hallie comes up with so many hockey assists where his teammate will make the extra swing. I think it's going to age like wine. I do lean on the side of I want to see Haliburton do this for a few more seasons where we can have a real tangible peak. Mm-hmm. But I see it. I mean, he is one of the most brilliant, intelligent, best decision makers I've ever watched play the game, and I love Tyrese.
Dude, it's just incredible. Like, there are guys, again, who have hit more home runs, who have made more A++ passes, okay? Guys like Nash and Magic, who I'm going to keep coming back to, they are so aggressive, and they have more of that scoring threat, so they deliver more passing value overall. But the decision-making, like the ability to perfectly walk the line between aggression while never taking on significant risk, like, that's what Hallie does so incredibly well. No, he's not going to be the most aggressive, but he's also far from the most conservative. And yet he's able to just, like, deliver this ratio of good passes to bad passes that might be the highest we've ever seen. And yeah, there's fewer great passes, but there's so many good ones and so few bad ones.
And he never feels like he oversteps that line. You know what I mean?
Right.
He never. I think decision making and I think it can just get underrated and underappreciated. And he's honestly, not for Pacers fan. I am excited. I will say I am excited that the Pacers, even though they stink this year, I'm happy they got Big Zoo. I'm excited to look and see how that connection is going to be. I was going to say I'm glad Hallie has been out. I'm glad. I wish he was available. I'm glad that it seems like people are finally absorbing and appreciating what he was to this team now that he's not out there. Because, I mean, we were, banging the drum all last playoffs, even with all the incredible moments. People were still hating on Haliburton, all the incredible buzzer beaters. I think it's kind of setting in for a lot of people now. Wow, this guy really is one of the most valuable offensive players in the NBA today.
Absolutely. And I really don't think there's a comparison for him. I'm not joking, like in all of NBA history, because I think maybe the inclination is look at the guys where it's like, okay, they dialed down their scoring volume to ramp up their playmaking volume, and they were so selfless, and maybe people would say like a Magic or a Nash because of that. But Hallie really is quite different from those two, and they're all different from one another. And of course, Nash and Magic are just in totally different tiers as players from Haliburton. But they're all underrated as scorers by their pure scoring volume. That's true. Nash and Magic absolutely flat out better scorers than Hallie. But Hallie also is a very effective, efficient scorer, and he can beat defenses that way. And he has his bread and butter stuff, the three ball, the step back, the floater game that causes defenses to respect him as a scorer, which obviously opens up his value as a playmaker even more so. But there are definitely some pretty fundamental differences. Like, Nash and Magic had the audacity and the creativity dialed like all the way up to 100. Whereas Haliburton is much more so about valuing every possession, never turning the ball over. Like, that's a pretty sizable difference in passing mentality. And then Nash and Magic were super ball dominant, whereas Hallie's really defined by his willingness to get off the ball, and he sets himself apart with the off-ball value that he does bring. In terms of size, he's kind of like right smack dab in the middle between the two. But all of those things considered, I really don't think there's a good comparison for Hallie. And I think what's really cool is more than any other player ever, probably, he is defined by his IQ and specifically his selflessness, and that has fueled such great team offense. And I know there were some people who said, oh, he's a beneficiary of the system. I think very clearly he is the system. All of the reads, all the decisions, all the stuff in the full court he's able to do, like, there's no replicating that. He's one of one in that way, and so, yeah, I think he belongs here. I think he's that sick, and I think he's that impactful as a passer. Who's in your 8 spot, Logan?
I didn't know what to do with this guy just because he did play in the oldest era back on my list of any player, but I would have felt wrong leaving him off. I've got Oscar Robertson here in my 8 spot, and I think Oscar's case is a lot more closer to what your criteria is, but in just terms of value, every single season, he is leading out basically a top 2 offense with Cincinnati, routinely being the number 1 in the league. The second he leaves, they plummet towards the, bottom 4 teams in basketball. He goes to Milwaukee. They're the best offense in the NBA, right? He's not the driving force of that. That's Kareem. He's the best player in basketball. But every year until he retires, they're a top 5 offense. Like, Oscar was just ahead of his time. One of the game's elite scorers and playmakers at that time. And it's different, right? Like, Oscar, I think, is more so one of those playmakers that derives a lot of his assists from his scoring ability, where he's drawing double teams and he's kicking out. But, again, what I was saying earlier, I just would have felt wrong putting Oscar down because of the era he played in. Super impactful. Led the NBA in assists per game 7 times.
Yeah.
Like, again, I just would have felt wrong leaving Oscar off this list. I think there are guys who were, better decision makers, guys who were more fundamentally unselfish, guys who were higher IQ, better technical passers. But why am I going to penalize Oscar because he was born in the era that he was born in and played in the NBA in the 60s and 70s? We don't do that here at Nerd Sesh. We're not trying to put down guys who played, 50, 60 years ago. It's just, it's not how we should think. The game evolves as it goes on, and I think
Right.
Oscar was the best playmaker of his era. So, I just would have felt wrong leaving him off my list. So he's going to end up in my 8th spot.
I have Oscar at number 6. He is really a pioneer on this list. Like, he is the first of many things. He's the first great ball-dominant playmaking guard. He's the first great pick-and-roll player, period. Like, that was a relatively new form of offense at this point in the 60s, and Oscar was far and away the best at it in his time, definitely the best pick-and-roll passer in the league. And he was, like, basically the first great offensive engine in NBA history, like somebody who could just churn out number one offenses if you put the ball in his hands. Nobody before him had done that. Oscar came in, he led 5 straight number one offenses to start his career. I think there's a strong case that he is the first player ever to hold the title of best scorer and playmaker in the league simultaneously. And there's an argument as to whether or not he was ever the best scorer, but I think that he makes a case. I mean, just with his volume and as efficient as he was, and the extent to which he was lapping the league as a playmaker is absolutely insane. And that's where, like, when we talk about relative to era, it gets a little bit tricky because I think the game has evolved in such a way that, like, there just are more great playmakers in relatively modern NBA history. Like, I think with the changes in the rules, improving spacing, improving ball handling, and overall just like sort of this shift more so to, hey, you are the captain of our offense. You're going to have the ball in your hands all the time. Like, there's just more guys who have single-handedly sort of speared great offenses. But Oscar was the guy who did that in his time. And it's just crazy if you look at his assist production compared to everybody else. Because obviously everybody thinks, oh, Stockton, like he's the GOAT of assist production, right? And it's like, fair enough. But if you look at the competition, I mean, throughout the 60s, Oscar averaged 10.5 assists per game in an era in which 3 other players averaged 6 or more assists per game that decade, right? It's not like the NBA of the 80s or today where you will routinely have multiple players in a single season averaging double-digit assists. Like, the closest guy to Oscar in that period was the great Guy Rogers, shout out, Warriors legend, at 8.3 assists per game. So Oscar was more than 2 assists per game ahead of him over the decade, and was a great passer in a number of ways. Phenomenal in transition, which was so important at that time when so much of the game was played with like this frenetic pace. He was a great pick and roll passer. He had great vision, great size. I mean, being a legitimate 6'5" strong guard. A lot of his game was predicated upon post up, like back to the basket and face up play. It was just such a different time. And as a big guard, he sort of blended that like unique scoring arsenal, operating a lot from the mid-range area as a sort of big shot maker over the top. But then he could also pick apart double teams from there. And he could also flow into a pick and roll and make reads and had good feel with the roller. And he had great anticipation as a passer. Like, the amount of offense that he created for others, considering the spacing of the time, is really remarkable because shit was so clogged up. Like, it was hard to be the guy who the entire defense was keyed in on. And he was able to thrive in that environment in a way that nobody else could at the time. And I do think his passing is the biggest strength there. I mean, he's pretty even as a scorer and passer. I think he stands out more in the context of his time as a passer, though. So I have him a couple spots higher than you. The only difference between him and the top 5, I think the top 5 are like genuine visionary passers. Like, I think that there is a level of superhuman processing and court mapping with them that I don't know if it was possible even in Oscar's time, but I think like relative to their peers even, they stand out more in those ways where you're just like, how the fuck is that guy so brilliant as a passer? And I think Oscar clearly far and away the best of his time, but that's the nod that I would give to the top 5 above him. In my number 8 spot, Logan, I have another guy who I think is probably going to be surprising to some, many. I mentioned him just for a second earlier. I have Kevin Johnson here. KJ was insane, dude. Like, he is at the top of the list of players who I would recommend if you are a young fan who has not watched a lot of throwback basketball, go watch Kevin Johnson, because he is somebody who will immediately pop off the screen and you will genuinely go, if you drop that guy in today's NBA, like, he would be outstanding. Just such a phenomenal downhill guard and such a great offensive engine. I think oftentimes people think of him as the number 2 guy on those teams with Charles Barkley, of course, right? The 93 finals run and the subsequent couple of years. But I want to highlight the period before Chuck joined the team. 1989 to 1992, KJ led 4 straight top 5 offenses, including 3 top 3 offenses. He did that without Chuck. And then Barkley got there. They together led back-to-back number 1 offenses. They were the best offense in the league, and then one more top 3 offense. So it's like an extended 7-year run there of Kevin Johnson pretty much being involved with the best offenses in basketball. But if you look at that period again before Chuck was on the team, 89 to 92, in games that KJ played, the Suns were a +6 relative offense. That is like elite offensive efficiency. And in games that he was out, they had a -3.5 relative offensive rating. So a huge swing. I think that speaks to his impact. I think just the consistency with which they were elite offenses speaks to his impact. And he's doing this all as a guy whose playmaking is his supreme value. Like KJ was a hell of a scorer. He could carve you up in that way. Of course, the two things are interrelated, but you're looking at this elite team offense, elite in the regular season, 89 to 92 in the playoffs. KJ's averaging over 11 assists per game and leading a +4 relative offense. His playmaking value was the driving factor there. I think he is the best downhill passing guard ever. And I mean that in the sense that, like, okay, you could argue, well, is it Nash? Because he's somebody who got into the paint a lot and was maybe the best interior passer ever. When I say downhill guard, I mean like somebody who you're thinking of as that athletic, rim pressuring, downhill sort of force. A Russell Westbrook, a Ja Morant, right? Anybody in that mold, I think that KJ was the best because he could get to the rim at will. He was impossible to stay in front of. He was a ridiculous athlete. And then compared to a Westbrook, he was a much more polished, precise, and also creative passer. So I give him that nod as being the best downhill passing guard ever. And he was so explosive that when you think about like those elite athletic guards who have the ability to hang in the air, right, and adapt and make some of those aerial adjustments and find crazy laydown passes and spot cutters and kick out to shooters, like KJ was excellent at all of that stuff. He was an elite pick and roll passer. He was always comfortable working among the trees in the paint. Like his vision was so great, even in traffic. He was ridiculously good at threading the needle in tight windows. And then also another hugely important thing, I'm praising this with Hallie, like transition offense is the most efficient in basketball. So if you have a guy who is going to consistently get out and push pace and excel there, that means he's going to create more efficient opportunities for your offense. KJ was crazy fast. The Suns played crazy fast. So he's one of the best transition passers ever as well, I would say. And I think if you go peak to peak, him versus Stockton, like, I'll be real, it's not that close to me. Like, KJ was able to lift those offenses on his own in a way that Stockton couldn't because he was the more dynamic playmaker and he was the more dynamic scorer. And I just think he's one of the most underrated guards, players, passers, all of the above of all time. Not a good guy. You know, I'm not putting him above Stockton because of that. He's a bad guy. But, I mean, just looking objectively at the basketball resume, when we look at the passing peak, he was just outstanding, and everybody go watch a little KJ because the dude was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that he's on your list. I briefly thought about KJ, and then I hit him with the pedophile tax, so I did not include him on my list. But,
fair.
I mean, at his apex, I mean, he's a monster. Dude, like 20 and 12 repeatedly, and upwards of that. Dude, the number one offenses thing is remarkable, and like you said, I think he can kind of get overlooked just because of Barkley coming in there and then them going to the finals run. Like, he was a great player. But yeah, I didn't put too much thought into KJ, I'll be honest.
All right, well, who is in your 7 spot, Logan?
In my 7 spot, I've got Larry Bird. And when I go back and watch a lot of Bird tape, it really reminds me of Jokic in a lot of ways. And what I mean by that is, and I know people have made that comparison, but specifically the playmaking value that comes from the post, you know, playing with his back to the basket so much and spotting cutters and guys on the block. And it's different, right? Because all of these guys are tall, Jokic, Bird, but it's different from like a Magic or a LeBron, these tall ball handlers who, you know, initiate from the perimeter. Bird is much more of one of those playmakers that does it from the post or he does it within the flow of the offense. And that's one of my favorite things about Larry. his ability to strike that balance between scoring and playmaking to maximize the offense. That being said, I do think that Larry did stuff that was ahead of his time. You see him driving into the lane and some of those little shifty kick-out passes on layups to the big man sitting in the paint, if it's Parrish or if it's Kevin McHale. And he's just extremely intelligent. I think Larry's one of the smartest players in basketball history. I mean, and I think you see this on defense too, right? Like his positioning, but it really shines offensively with his court vision, his awareness, and his unselfishness. I don't know if Larry created, again, I'm going to make this case, but it's going to go directly against one of the guys that's highest on my on my list, so maybe we suspend reality a little bit when we get to that guy.
No, I'm calling your ass out.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm frying you and it's going viral.
I'm down, bro. I don't know if Larry created the most high value assist, but he did get a ton of defensive attention. I do want to emphasize that point. Like Larry did just have the defense in a bind. I don't know if Larry's the best technical passer. He is audacious. And what I mean by that is, like, when we're talking about the elite of the elite, like the best top 5, I feel like everybody, Larry's a great all-time passer. It's why he's on this list. I feel like everybody above him is a better technical passer, but Larry is one of the greats. And again, the way Larry did it specifically within the flow of the offense is one of the things that I think is my favorite things about him. Not doing too much, but finding that balance between scoring and playmaking, and just his intelligence. And Larry, when we're talking about flashy, audacious guys, man, Larry will bust it out, man. If it's something near the sideline, saving a ball and finding a guy, if it's those little overhead passes when he's posting up a guy, like I mentioned earlier, those little kick-out, bailout passes to the big man. Larry was ahead of his time, and I think when I think of the greatest passers ever, I think of Larry, and I think he has to be on this list if you're making it.
Yeah, I have Larry higher than you. I think I'm even higher on Larry than you are. He's in my top 5. I mean, he's in that class of, like, the true visionaries where you're just absolutely blown away every time that you watch them. I would hear an argument that Larry Bird is the most gifted passer to ever live. And I would definitely hear an argument that he's the most versatile passer ever. And I might make the argument, I probably would, that he has the best feel as a passer in NBA history. I do think Larry has the best offensive feel, period. Like, the guy just had such an incredible ability to blend everything in his game. I mean, on-ball value with off-ball value, scoring with passing. It just felt like he always was able to make the right play, right? We talk about that being a superpower, and Larry absolutely had it.
I just wanted to mention the thing that you were talking about earlier, the reaction, the reactive play, the quick decision-making is really what separates Larry.
100%. He's the best quick touch passer. Jokic is probably the only guy who can compare there. And that's where, again, like you're saying, I mean, they really do stand out because so many of these guys, it's like, all right, I am the primary offensive initiator operating from the perimeter consistently, right? Relatively ball dominant. And of course, Larry and Jokic, they both got a ton of touches in their offense, like especially Jokic. He leads the league in touches like every year. But the way in which they're getting those touches is very different, right? So much of it is off the catch, operating from the elbows, like all these different spots that Bird could occupy on the floor and be extremely effective from, both as a scorer and a passer. It's a truly unique ability. And his processing speed and creativity and craft and that ability to be such an impact offensive player from anywhere on the floor in any action, that's his greatest superpower. But, man, I think if you just go pass for pass, Larry's literally as good as anybody ever. I think probably the only reason that I don't have him higher is because he doesn't have the same passing volume as the top 3 to 4 guys. And I don't know, the top 3 are so crazy that they were going to be the top 3 no matter what. Him versus the guy in my 4 spot, I think, is a really interesting conversation. But, like, after Magic, I think he's the most creative and deceptive passer ever. Just his ability to fool the defense, to find an angle for delivery where you're just like, where did you come up with that, man? How did you possibly do that? I mean, the court mapping, the awareness, like, Larry is literally as good as anybody ever at all of those different things. He is the greatest touch passer of all time, which is just so crazy when it's like, okay, off an offensive rebound, you can immediately redirect the ball perfectly to a teammate, right? Any sort of give and go situation, any sort of passing cut, it like takes 0.1 seconds for the ball to get off your hand and then perfectly finds a teammate in stride. I think Jokic is the only comparison there, and I would still take Bird. And that like timing and vision spotting cutters, outstanding as a driver, super inventive at finding passing angles. And like what is so special about Larry is, again, just this offensive flexibility in every conceivable way, but he could be the 3, he could be the 4. This dude consistently played with 2 other bigs in his career. Like, Larry is a natural power forward, and he could play with those other bigs, and he could feed those other bigs. He was so effective operating from the perimeter and the mid-range. He could make the laydown passes, the entry passes. He could find them off the roll. Like, in every way, he was just going to enhance those around him in the half court. And then he's also a top 5 transition and outlet passer ever, like absolutely sensational there. It's just incredible, the feel and the awareness that he had and the versatility as a passer. If I had to pick any one of these passers to play with any of the other dudes on this list, I think Larry is probably the choice, just because he amplifies any situation so much with his passing without needing the ball all that much, right? In a way that is just so conducive to team offense. It's what's so incredible about him. That's why, like, he led one of the greatest team offensive runs in NBA history, and he's one of the greatest offensive players ever. Obviously, it's that combination of scoring and passing, but I do think his passing was more of a superpower than his scoring, like, definitely.
Do you think Larry's the most portable player ever?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, especially when you consider,
or at least like we're talking about stars, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there just was nothing, considering the time, that he couldn't do at a very high level. And maybe he didn't have one of those A+++ gifts, although I think his passing was that, but whatever, right? He didn't have like those routes to hyper efficient scoring offense that some of the other all-time greats did. He was an efficient scorer, but he wasn't going to give you 30 a game on plus 7% relative true shooting. But he could do everything your offense could possibly need, anything any offense could possibly need at a really high level. And I think the passing is the greatest strength there. So I couldn't really be higher on Larry as a passer. I guess I could, because some people say he's a better passer than LeBron. And I do think he's a more gifted passer than LeBron.
That's what my dad was telling me.
Larry Bird was born and meant to be a better passer than LeBron. I think LeBron delivers more passing value at his best because of play style, because of the amount that he had the ball in his hands, and also because of the fact that his scoring threat was even up a level from Larry's, and so he was able to just pressure the rim in such a way where he's the greatest kick-out passer ever, right? I mean, the value of the three-point shots that he created for his teammates, too, the spacing of his era. That's why, spoiler alert, I do have LeBron one spot higher than Larry Bird, but in terms of pure, like, God-given ability, Larry's passing, again, it's like, it's right there with Magic. It's unbelievable, the highs that he had as a passer. I think it just comes down to, if you look at it, 84 to 87, I mean, he's 6.9 assists a game in the regular season, playoffs 6.7 assists per game. You compare that to the guys who pretty much, like, fueled their entire offenses with their on-ball passing, and I just think Larry, on a per-pass basis, maybe he's the most valuable ever. Like, I do think he created really, really high-value assists, really high-value shots for his teammates. He's still probably not number one, but whatever. Maybe he's a spot higher than this. I think he'd probably be above LeBron in that. However, the total passing value added, I think I give the nod to guys who just had a little more volume as passers, but I'd have no problem with somebody having Bird a spot higher. Higher than that, I think the top three kind of separate themselves to me. In my 7 spot, Logan, I've got another one of my favorites. I love Larry, and I love Chris Paul. So he falls here for me. He is one of the best pick and roll passers ever. He's probably the best lob passer ever. I think there's a couple guys who push for that title. If it's Trae Young, if it's Steve Nash, and CP3 had the luxury of playing with 2 of the best lob threats in the NBA at the same time, but I still probably give him that nod. He's probably the best pocket passer ever. Like, when it comes to just fundamental accuracy on those, like, pretty traditional pick and roll passes, I think CP3 is maybe the best that we've ever seen. And until a fella named Tyrese Haliburton came along and pushed him for this title, he was the GOAT of protecting the ball as a volume passer. Like, a 4-to-1 career assist to turnover ratio is insane. There are so few guys. I mean, There's two, basically, who could handle the ball at the volume that CP3 did and be a consistent 10-plus assists per game guy and turn the ball over 2.5 times per game or fewer. That value in the possession game is so immense. And it speaks to the fact that CP3 was always in complete control as a passer and as an offensive player overall. And that ability in the half court to just methodically get to whatever he wanted, again, as a scorer or a passer, it's the reason he engineered back-to-back number one offenses with the Clippers when I think that was his passing peak, I would say. And overall, just elite offense after elite offense, and his playmaking was the driving force of that. I'm extremely high on Chris Paul overall as a player. I may not be the highest on his peak passing, though, because as much as I value his turnover suppression, I also do think it came with a trade-off. Like, I just think CP3 absolutely had more limitations as a passer than my top 5 guys. The top 5 guys where it's like, okay, A+++ vision, A+++ creativity. Again, spoon-feeding teammates, those super high-value shots. Chris Paul didn't do that like that. Like, I think his size was something of a limitation in terms of just not having all the passing angles available to him. And I think he lacked that top-tier vision and that top-tier aggression. Like, there were things that, Logan, hear me out. Okay. Does Steve Nash gap Chris Paul in terms of vision?
I mean, I don't want to reveal where he's at, but
yes, right?
Yes,
That's what I'm
yes.
saying. So
I
I'm
mean,
not
but like
talking about
Steve's-
anyone other
Yeah.
than the very top tier, okay? Like,
okay, I would agree with that. I would agree
my
with that.
top 3 and Larry, I think, clear Chris Paul in terms of their vision, creativity, and aggression. And that is the trade-off that you make with Chris Paul when he says, hey, I'm never going to give the ball away. I'm never going to make the mistake. I'm also not going to hit as many home runs, though. Obviously, it's incredibly valuable. I lean on the side of preferring the guys who are going to hit a couple more of those home runs because I think overall the trade-off is worth it, especially when you get to like a Magic, a Nash level. Like, I mean, the number of huge plays that they are going to hit on and create, I will always live with one more turnover a game for them doing that. However, I mean, they're the literal GOAT. So Chris Paul's vision was still great. Again, it just wasn't like GOAT level, and he wasn't as aggressive. And I do think the other thing, I mean, if we're going to compare him to the best of the best, which I think is worth doing just because, like, the assist numbers are there for Chris Paul, right? The career assist numbers, he's second all time. Another thing that would separate the top tier of a Nash and a Magic, and those two guys are just different, but those guys, incredible pace pushers, incredible transition passers. CP3 always had a tendency to slow things down, and that could cause you to miss some more initial high-value passing opportunities, right? Transition hit-aheads, he wasn't hitting at nearly the same rate as those other guys. And so, again, it's the trade-off of, okay, yeah, you get the surgical half-court offense, and he can strangle the pace, and he's comfortable with that, and he's a great offensive player. But when you compare him to the absolute best of the best, I do think other guys were able to find and create more easy stuff than Chris Paul. Like, I think there's the perception of the Clippers, of course, as this fast and high-flying, high-paced team. I mean, they were high-flying because they had Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, but they never played fast, really. I think there was 1 year that they were top 10 in pace when Chris Paul was there. So those are just my little knocks on him. And if you compare, like, the rim assists that he's creating for his teammates, Chris Paul's best seasons, he's at like 4.5 rim assists per game. That's really good. However, it's not that close to like a Steve Nash, who was at 6 a game at his peak, or Magic's numbers, if we had them, would be up that high as well. So that's just why I have him down here and not higher. He was an elite creator. He blended scoring and playmaking in an incredibly great way. He just wasn't among the absolute best creators ever. And I do think in the playoffs, he could shift to being a bit more score first than people sometimes remember. Like, if you look at the playoff years with the Clippers, he ramps up his scoring volume, which I always give him so much credit for because it's so impressive. He does dial down the passing volume a little bit with that too. I mean, 8.7 playoff assists per game, which is really good, but it's not like the 9.8 assists per game he averaged in the regular season. So I do think he was a bit more prone at times to look for his own mid-range pull-up or what have you versus, again, a Magic or a Nash where they were like much more dialed in the direction of, okay, I can ramp up my scoring volume as needed, and they proved it absolutely in the playoffs. But if there's an opportunity for me to make an A-plus pass to a teammate, that's always my first option. For Chris Paul, it wasn't quite like that with his passing. So that's why I land on him here at number 7.
I get the knocks on Chris. I've got Chris all the way up at 4. And when I think about Chris, he's one of those guys that I think at an A-plus level just saw the game develop ahead of everybody else. He saw plays that were going to happen before anybody else on the court did. And I agree with you. Some of the things that I value most, elite decision maker, protecting the basketball. I think he's the second best pick and roll passer ever. I think it's him and Nash. Like, they are just both ridiculous. And Chris is just mastery in control of the game along with his IQ. The thing that puts him over the top, though, and why I had to have him in the top 5, though, I just think his technical passing ability is up there with anybody else. And I know that's not as important for you, and I understand with your criteria why he's down a little bit more, but I couldn't leave Chris out of my top 5. I mean, he is just a master of his craft, and offensive success and team success followed Chris every single place he went. If it was in New Orleans, if it was L.A., if it was Houston, if it was Phoenix, I mean, Chris is one of those ultimate kind of stabilizers, and he's just a master. Yeah, I couldn't leave him out of my top 5, man. And again, the thing that puts him over the top for me is that ability to protect the basketball, to make good decisions, and the technical mastery. I think CP's A+ in all those categories. CP3 is all time in all those categories. Hold up.
Yeah. I mean, you know how much I love Chris Paul. I guess the only distinction I would make is, I mean, he led great offense after great offense. My top 6 led like all-time great offenses in their own ways. And I do view the playmaking of all of them as like the driving factor for that, because I just think like, I mean, absolutely. When you talk about stability, it doesn't get better than Chris Paul. When you talk about scraping the absolute peaks of what NBA offense is capable of, then you can do better than Chris Paul, right? I think there are guys who just pushed the limit more so offensively and did it so successfully that they ended up returning more value than CP3. That's really the only thing that I can say about him. And also, I'm so high on him because I think his scoring is underrated, and I think it's underrated, like, just having a guy who was a clear plus defensively while being such a great scorer and playmaker. It's really about the totality of Chris Paul and just the consistent impact on winning, specifically his passing, which I think people so often key on as like the thing with him. I'm maybe not the highest on, because I do think he's more so like the sum of his parts and a whole lot of great parts. So with all that being said, Logan, I mean, I have revealed through my number 5. You are onto your number 6 though, correct?
Yes. I have Nikola Jokic here in my 6th spot.
Whoa.
I mean, I think he's the greatest passing big man of all time. I don't think it's particularly close. Jokic does stuff every single game that just leaves me slack-jawed. And I mean, for your, I assume Jokic is probably going to be top 3, maybe number 1 or something like that. Like, I wouldn't put that past you. I mean, I just think he's a different kind of passer. And I don't know, I do lean a little bit more slanted towards the guys that are initiating from the perimeter in that style of play. And maybe that's not the right way to view this, because I think that Jokic, like these other guys that we're going to bring up among the GOAT tier, can make every pass in the book, specifically because of all the different angles that are available to Jokic, because of his size and positioning and that scoring ability. Like, Carson and I harp on it all the time. Like, there are just things that Jokic can do on the court that other guys aren't able to do because of certain limitations. If they aren't as dominant as scorers, Jokic is one of the greatest scorers of all time. Therefore, he has extra defensive attention that open up passes that aren't available for other guys. At his height, he's like, Jokic is 6'11", 7 foot. Like, he can make every pass in the book. And out of the post, I'd say the GOAT. Transition, I think he's the GOAT outlet passer. Elite touch, elite court mapping, elite decision making. That's really the only reason why he's down at number 6, is the style of passer that Jokic is. I don't have anything negative that I could say about Jokic as a player and a passer. There's just a few more guys that, again, the initiating from the perimeter, and I think there's just a handful of guys that are slightly better technical passers than Jokic, but that list is very, very short. And like I said, man, I don't have a ton of negative stuff to say about Jokic. I don't think you can. So I'm not going to push back heavy if Jokic is higher, but I have him here in my number 6 spot.
Wow. I did not expect Jokic to be brought up so early in this episode. I do have him in my top 3, and I have him firmly in my top 3. I think those guys are kind of in a tier of their own to me, and I will spoil it. I have him down at number 3. Previously, if you had asked me this question a year ago, I think I would have had him number 2. I've moved him down a grand total of 1 spot, and I'll get into that. But really, the only nitpicks that I can have about Jokic's passing, they only matter up against the top 2. Against everybody else, I simply think that he is a better, more valuable passer. And there is a lot of Bird in his passing value, but it is like, what if you added 3 inches of height and you made him an even more imposing scorer and you put him in a more evolved NBA overall?
50 to 60 pounds on him, too.
Absolutely.
Just make him strong as an ox.
Absolutely, which I think just makes him the better offensive player overall. But specifically in terms of the passing ability, like I said, there's absolutely a case that Bird is the most versatile passer ever. I think the dude who he's competing with there is Jokic, because the ability to impact the game as a passer in so many different ways from this guy is just completely ridiculous. So you're talking about valuing that ability to be that primary initiator from the perimeter, right? And consistently deliver passing value like that. The only 2 guys who I think in that archetype have ever delivered more value than Jokic does in his style of being more so, hey, I mean, the offense is still going to run through me at crazy volume, but I can just do it in all these different ways. The only 2 guys who I think have ever delivered more total passing value are the 2 who I have above him. And in that context, like, I can agree that those 2, who I'll just spoil it, it's Magic and Nash, okay? I've glazed them a million times this episode. I think they're the 2 best passers ever, but like, they have an ability to consistently deliver their passing volume regardless of matchup that you can't quite say about Jokic. Like, that's my only criticism of Jokic is in the playoffs, we have seen his playmaking volume go down just a bit, right? Since 2023 in the regular season, he's 9.6 assists per game to 3.3 turnovers. And by the way, just like those raw assist numbers are another reason that I think he's above Bird. I just think he's been utilized even more so as an offensive hub than Bird was at his time. In the playoffs since 2023, 8.8 assists per game to 3.6 turnovers. Still great, obviously, but the assists drop a little bit. The turnovers go up a little bit. And I do think we have seen teams find some success packing the paint and just limiting Jokic's interior passing value a bit. Now, again, this only matters up against Magic and Nash because I think there was no way to take away their interior passing value, and there is a way to do it with Jokic. That being said, I still think he can fire cross-court passes to the weak side corner, right, and create a bunch of open threes for his teammates, and I think the Nuggets offense has mostly run into problems because guys haven't been able to make those shots when they have, right? Like a Christian Brown who feasts on so many cuts from Jokic in the regular season. If teams are going to pack the paint and force Brown to be a shooter in the playoffs, the problem isn't that Jokic can't make the passes, because he can and he does. The problem is if Brown can't make the shots. Nevertheless, they're able to just knock down his impact a tiny bit there, because regardless, I mean, if you can get a guy like Christian Brown, again, a super high percentage shot around the rim, that is still more valuable than even the open corner 3. Both are very valuable shots, but if you consider personnel, then especially the fine to the cutter is more valuable. And it is the turnovers too. Like, I think part of the reality is I love so much the ability to be this level of passer out of the post. I mean, we've never seen anything like it, right? Jokic totally redefined what is possible for an offensive player. He is completely beyond anything we've ever seen from a big man offensively, and especially as a passer. Like, there's no comparison. And there's such an advantage that comes to being able to dissect you from that post area, right? At the same time, there is an ability to crowd that space and swarm and congest that area because it's easier to double the post. And you know where he's going to be operating from compared to somebody out on the perimeter with a live dribble. My point is just like, I think we have seen Jokic forced into a couple more mistakes in the playoffs where these super feisty athletic teams who send a ton of bodies at him, they can interfere with his passing value just a little bit more than anybody ever could with Magic or Nash. And that's really all I can say. Like, I think the reason I would have had Jokic number 2 a year ago is I would have said it's his passing versatility that is just so incredible, right? And he's a more versatile passer than Nash, but I think Nash is more effective because I think Nash's A++ passing stuff translated so perfectly to the playoffs in a way that Jokic, again, even if it's only taking 5-10% out of his value over these last couple postseasons, and he's still above everybody else, the bar is just that crazy high when it's Nash and Magic. But I do think in terms of like pure visionary shit, it's Jokic and Magic and Nash. And like, I mean, his passing highlights might be second in NBA history only to Magic. Put Bird up there as well. But the court mapping is absolutely godlike. And the velocity and the accuracy and the range, I mean, the strength that he has, right? The ability to fire some of these one-handed passes, such distance, unbelievable. The variety of deliveries he's comfortable with, the no-look passing, I mean, might be second only to Magic in the history of this game. And the processing speed, all while he's absolutely massive, like, it is absolutely incredible. Like you said, he's the best passer ever out of the post. He's the best at spotting cutters and shooters operating from there. He's the best outlet passer ever. And that ability to deliver passing value in so many different ways, dude. It's so distinct. Off the short roll, running handoffs, quick give and go actions, like his insane touch passing, his ability to obliterate zones operating from the nail, right, as the man in the middle who can just see everything and make every pass. He can run inverted pick and roll. It is absolutely absurd how many ways he can pick you apart as a passer on any given day. And that's why I have him above everybody other than the big two. Like, I mean, we'll see the guys who you have above him. And again, our criteria is difficult here because I'm talking about passing value, but I do think that Jokic is flat out just a better passer than LeBron and a more valuable passer than LeBron. I think the variety that he has, I mean, I think the vision and the creativity, it even surpasses Bron. And I feel pretty confident saying he belongs in that top 3.
I do have LeBron in my 5 spot, 1 spot above Jokic. And the reason I did that is I just think LeBron's the most intelligent basketball player I've ever watched. I think you're talking about court vision and court mapping. I think LeBron's the GOAT. We can.
No.
I think it's LeBron, man.
Magic, bro. It's Magic.
Well, Magic's in my. I don't. Damn, I don't want to let. Well, Magic's
That's not
in my
really
1
a
spot.
spoiler,
Magic's,
bro. That's not really a spoiler.
Magic's
I
the
think
GOAT.
Jokic still, though, dude, like the awareness from any spot on the floor of where everybody on the floor
I
is.
just think
like,
that applies to LeBron
has
too,
full
man.
vision a vast majority of the time, right? That's not the case for Jokic, and yet he still has this supernatural awareness of when dudes are cutting, like the timing he has as a passer. I think LeBron misses more A+ passes by not attempting them than Jokic. I think Jokic is the best outside of Magic and Nash at cashing in on those big-time passes, and that to me is kind of the ultimate testament to vision and court mapping.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is because Jokic does play with his back to the basket so much. Like, and maybe I'm holding that against him a little too much, but LeBron's the best I've ever seen. Jokic and Magic.
Well, what do you mean by that? It's harder to pick apart a defense as a passer with your back to the basket.
I'm saying the reason that some of those cutting angles and stuff is available is because the defense is almost lulled to sleep because they're not expecting Jokic to fire those passes. Like, that's the reason those opportunities are available.
I don't agree that it's the fact that they're not expecting that he's going to make those passes. I mean, I think it's more so the concern about his scoring threat from that spot on the floor. Like, when you can get deep position like that, obviously that's very advantageous.
I just don't want to forget what LeBron was. I just don't want to forget what LeBron was like at those 2015 to 2018 Cleveland. Man, that's maybe the most complete offensive engine. Like, if you were starting from 1 point ever, and like that's the LeBron I'm focusing in on. I don't know. For my money, I think LeBron is the smartest basketball player ever, and I think he is the GOAT of the control that LeBron had over the game at that stage in his career. And the only reason LeBron isn't higher is because I do think that some guys are better technical passers. I think that some guys are better out of initiating from the perimeter and stuff like that. But when we're talking about his GOAT level abilities, I do think it's I think LeBron's the smartest guy ever, and I think he's got that GOAT-level court mapping ability. That's why I went with him over Jokic more so than anything else.
Well, I have LeBron higher than you. I have him at number 4. I just also have Jokic even higher. I think that if you look at that like 2017 to 2020 range, if we forget about the 2019 season when he was hurt and that was all weird, like this is the time when LeBron had just solved the game. It's the best intersection of him still having close to his peak scoring value and still having like truly elite athleticism, but also having that completely surgical passing. Like I do think LeBron has 2 GOAT traits as a passer, if we can make the distinction between these two. Fundamentally, he's the greatest passer ever when it comes to creating shots for three-point shooters, like period, point blank. That's a combination of him being the GOAT skip passer, right? The anticipation that he has there and the accuracy and the range. And then also the GOAT kick-out passer when it comes to fully collapsing the defense, the ability to find open teammates. Dude, 2017 and 2018, he was averaging nearly 5 assists per game to three-point shooters, right? So, okay, again, the most valuable assist you can create is one at the basket. The next most, obviously, is an open three-point shot for a teammate, and LeBron is the best at the latter. I think he could have done even more as a transition passer if he just pushed pace more. Like, I think on a per transition play basis, LeBron is as imposing a threat as the game has ever seen. He just didn't push pace as much as a Magic Johnson, like not even close, but I think he's still elite in terms of his transition passing overall. And he also does have phenomenal variety as a passer. Like LeBron, especially at this stage when he was in his mismatch attacking era, right, where he's sort of blending like, yeah, I'm still a great athlete, but also I've got this real old man strength now in a more refined post game. He could dot up cutters facing up. He could make some of those passes to cutters at times with his back to the basket, not super often, but at times. And then he also is able to obviously thrive with a big man in the 2-man game and find them off the roll and in the pocket with precision. And he could make laydown passes as a driver to bigs and cutters. And I just think this was absolutely when he was peaking as a passer. Like his velocity, his precision bounce passing, it's all so damn good. And of course, his processing and decision-making was outstanding. Like we're nitpicking here, right? We're talking about some very subtle distinctions. I do think the reason that I don't have LeBron top 3 as a passer is I think he was like an A- at a lot of different aspects of passing. And I think that makes him in total a top 5 passer. But when it comes to like a lot of the things that I'm praising him for, okay, it's like spotting cutters, he was really good. Jokic, clearly better. When it comes to interior passing to big men out of pick and roll, right? Okay, when it comes to lob passing, things like that. LeBron, very good. Magic, Nash, clearly better. Those guys more audacious, those guys more creative, those guys better at pushing in transition and creating easy opportunities there. So I know you have LeBron one spot lower than I do. I guess I'm just explaining why I don't have him in the top 3. I didn't really consider him in the top 3. I knew he was either going to be 4 or 5 for me, pretty much. But Logan, there's still a big fish out there who you have on your list, who you have not even named yet, who I know is not on my list. Are we there yet?
Yeah, we're there because
Okay.
I have Chris Paul in my 4 spot, and we can rip the Band-Aid off. I've got Jason Kidd here, and I completely understand why he wouldn't make your list based on the criteria. And that was one of the things that I struggled with most is, you know, balancing your totality of offensive impact. Even when Jason Kidd was going to the NBA Finals with the New Jersey Nets, those were bottom half of the league offenses, right? There's a reason they called him Ace and Kidd for so long, right? Like the dude couldn't shoot a jumper until he was older. And so I think when we are looking at complete offensive value, Kidd is probably one of the lowest guys on this list, if not the lowest. That being said, though, when it comes to technical passing in wizardry, there's just few guys who have left me in awe the way Jason Kidd has. Like, he's a wizard with the ball. Like, he would just warp my brain. When we're talking about transition passing, I think he's one of the greatest of all time. Yeah. Like, the spin he would put on balls, the way he would throw balls ahead of guys, have them bounce back perfectly right into their hands. Jason Kidd could put it into your pocket, and you wouldn't even realize it. Like, that's why he's here, you know, because I think there are a lot of arguments. We're talking about these high-value assists and the totality of your offense, and I think those are all very valid critiques of Jason Kidd. But when we're talking about passing IQ, technical passing ability, flashiness, creativity, selflessness. I think Jason Kidd is one of the greatest of all times. I think he's top 5 in terms of court vision. When I watch Jason, he just has such an understanding of physics and anticipation. Like when I brought up Chris Paul, like the ability to be 3 or 4 steps ahead of the defense and knowing just where to put the ball in the perfect spot. Kid's one of those special guys, like timing, spin, angles. There are a few guys that have ever left me in awe the way Jason Kidd could with a pass. And I know I've said this a few other times during the podcast today. I would feel wrong leaving this episode without having Jason Kidd on my list. And not only, not just off my list, but outside of the top 3, it would bother me. And so there are a lot of limitations that come up with Kidd as a total offensive player, and I completely understand your argument why he isn't going to be on your list. I think he's a wizard with the basketball, and just his understanding of all these things that I'm saying, the anticipation, the spin, the angles. He's one of the greatest technical passers of all time, and I think one of the smartest basketball players ever. And I get the knocks on him, but I couldn't leave Kidd off this list.
I get it. I mean, this is just purely a difference in criteria. Like I said off top, I think when you talk about pure passing ability, he's top 5. When you talk about passing value as I'm defining it, he just misses out. But a wizard with the basketball is the way to put it. I've never seen somebody able to manipulate spin like Jason Kidd specifically, which has just like created some of the coolest highlights ever. I love watching Jason Kidd pass the basketball, but he simply did not draw the levels of defensive attention as a scorer to create the shots that the other guys on this list did. That's what it comes down to. That's why throughout his peak, early 2000s, with the Suns, with the Nets, as you said, I mean, his team's offenses were below average pretty much every season. And he was able to do some offensive floor raising for those teams. But when we're talking about the standard of offense that we're holding guys to here, like, I know maybe it seems crazy to people, but genuinely, like Kevin Johnson, Tyrese Haliburton, these guys were truly elite offensive engines. Well, Hallie is right now, will be once he comes back, right? Like, you can rely on their playmaking in their own ways to lead to great team offense. And Kidd, as amazing a transition passer as he was, as amazing as he was when it comes to just like getting the ball to a guy in his spot, again, he did not create enough advantages, create enough plays to lead to good team offense in the way that the guys on my list could. I still really considered him. I hate leaving him off this list because when you do think of passing, obviously you think of Jason Kidd, but I couldn't quite have him here because of my criteria. And I do like my criteria, but I still think Jason Kidd was fantastic at his peak because I think he's the greatest defensive guard to ever live. So if I'm maybe a little lower on his passing value, I am about as high on his defense as one could possibly be. So Logan, with all that said, we're into the top 2, and I think we've pretty much said it at this point. We both have Steve Nash 2. We both have Magic Johnson 1. Talk about Nash for a second and why he has to be here.
Nash is just one of the greatest offensive players ever. I mean, he's just brilliant. I'm talking about I'm talking about the all-time court vision with some of these guys. Nash had eyes in the back of his head in the way he could manipulate a defense. And this is an important distinction where we are talking about a kid. Kid would have never gotten the defensive attention that Nash could. And that's why I think that Nash, I think he's the greatest half-court passer ever. Like, his ability to get into the teeth of the defense and draw attention and find shooters without even looking at them. His ability to make passes out of I think he's the greatest pick-and-roll passer as well, too, man, ahead of his time. I think Nash paved the way for a lot of the offensive principles that we see in the modern era. Nash was truly transcendent. And anybody that shits on Steve Nash or tries to denigrate him as a basketball player, shut your ears to those people, man, because they don't know what they're talking about. And the technical passing, again, the ability to see the game ahead of time and as it develops, if you made a defensive mistake, if anybody was out of position, Steve Nash was going to make you pay. And he could just make every pass in the game. The way, I don't know we're saying this about a lot of guys, but Nash is truly special in that way. Mm-hmm. Steve Nash could fit a fucking basketball in a mailbox, man. Like,
yeah,
he's unreal. Through traffic, like going back and watching some of these games, man, these passes don't make sense where he's throwing the ball between guys' legs. He's fitting passes to big men on the right block between 3 defenders. It doesn't make any sense. And again, the distinction that I would make with Nash between some of these other guys that we're talking about is his ability to get into the teeth of the defense.
Yeah.
And it's unique, right? Because it's a small guy with elite touch, but defenses had to sell out on Nash in that way because he's got some of the greatest touch we've ever seen from a basketball player, and he combines this elite ball handling and elite pick and roll presence and combines it with the elite decision making. And what I love about Nash, and me and Carson are talking about these guys at their apex, at their absolute best. Steve Nash still had this ability, even when he was old, man, to elevate guys around him and make great decisions where, don't get me wrong, obviously he had depreciated in value. When you're an old guard, your knees just can't take that kind of beating, but he was still that kind of brilliant decision maker and playmaker out of pick and roll, even into some of his older years, because of the things that you can't change about him. His brain, his technical passing ability, and his shooting touch. I love Steve Nash. He's number 2 to me just because Magic is the GOAT. But
yeah.
I love Steve Nash. I think he is one of the greatest offensive players ever, one of the greatest technical passers ever, and just go watch him, man. Nash is one of my favorite players to go back and watch, man. He's got the defense in a bind, man. He's got you eating out of the palm in his hand every single time down the floor. And he just leaves you with this kind of helpless feeling that only the greats in basketball can. And like Chris Paul, it really hurts my heart that Steve never got that ring that validates so many basketball players. And I feel like Chris Paul, people unfairly hold that against him when, again, if you look into the specifics of these playoff runs, and Carson and I have talked about this a myriad of times, if it's Stoudemire getting hurt, if it's them just running into these awesome Spurs teams, there are a lot of things that aren't Steve's fault, where Steve did everything he could have. I just wish he could have gotten one ring to where maybe people would appreciate him a little bit more, but can't talk shit on Nash, man. He's the GOAT.
I also think there's a distinction to be made between like why the Suns teams fell short, which is pretty much purely defense. And you can say Nash is responsible in that. Absolutely. Nash was a bad defender, like no doubt. But then when people in any way try to attribute their loss to some sort of offensive issue and say like, oh, Nash wasn't really that great offensively. What are you saying? He's a top 7-8 offensive player ever. They never won a title. It's like, brother, their offenses were all it was advertised in the playoffs, and their regular season offenses, it's the greatest run of team offense in NBA history. Like, I just want to make a distinction between even Nash, the overall player, who is 100% underrated, but then Nash purely offensively, who is even more underrated because it's almost like people can't conceive of the idea that a guy could be that great on that side of the ball and a team could be that great on that side of the ball and not win it all. They won it all because they had major defensive issues. But when it comes to offense and passing, I mean, Nash is truly one of the GOATs. He is the best pick and roll player and the best pick and roll passer in NBA history. Bro, you said it so well. I mean, I literally had written down in my notes exactly. Steve Nash pick and roll put mid-2000s defenses in a bind, maybe unlike any other action we've ever seen. I have said before that I think a Jokic post-up is the greatest action in NBA history, the most unstoppable. I think I have to change that to Steve Nash pick and roll. I mean, within the context of the Suns offense at the time, at least, it's just like every single option that you were presented with as a defense was pretty much instant death. Like this guy, I mean, he wasn't shooting threes at volume. Well, by today's standards, back then he was shooting threes at volume relative to the league. But I mean, there's a number of years where he's literally 45% from three. I think he basically shot 44% from three in Phoenix from 2005 to 2010. And then he's shooting 50% from mid-range at volume, and he's ridiculous from floater range, and he's so quick and so jittery and so ridiculous as a ball handler that he can just carve his way wherever he wants in the paint, and all the while, you're worried about him both getting a shot up himself because his touch and shot making was so great that a shot was going to be extremely efficient for him, or he was going to create some sort of nifty little lay down pass, lob, kick out to a shooter, whatever, a wide open shot for a teammate. Like, he was just bending the defense at his will all the damn time. And that's where, again, the volume stats can never capture Steve Nash's offensive impact, because what he was doing was picking the best possible option every time. His efficiency is among the greatest we've ever seen. His team's offenses are the greatest we've ever seen. If you look at like one team's extended run, he's the reason for that, man. It's that simple. We can look at the 06 season and what they did without Amare and how they were still an elite offense. Like, I don't want to get into a whole Nash thing right now. I can't help myself. But purely as a passer, well, it's all interrelated, right? I mean, this is the difference, right? Nash, Magic weren't volume scorers, but they could be when they needed to be, and they were great scorers. And the fact that they were so gifted as scorers and chose to be more efficient as to prioritize playmaking, it's what made them such truly great all-time offensive players. So it was incredible. And I mean, specifically the jump passing with Nash, right? That ability to terrify you with the possibility of a mid-range, short-range jumper, and then right as you step up to challenge him, he just whips a pass right past you. It was incredible. His anticipation, his touch, his placement as a passer, all like God tier. That ability to adjust in the air, fool a defense, just do it at full speed. I mean, Nash was like a blur moving around in the paint, dude. That stuff is God tier. I think he's one of the best lob passers ever. And outside of maybe Magic, nobody has ever just spoon-fed those rim attempts to their teammates like Steve Nash did. I mentioned this earlier, but 07 and 08, he was at 6 rim assists per game. That's unbelievable. Nobody on record is touching that number. All the while, he's creating 3-point shots for his teammates at an unmatched rate at the time. What Steve Nash and the Suns did for offense cannot possibly be overstated. At a time when offense was at an all-time low in modern NBA history, they came in and Nash made it look so easy. When it was so hard for everybody else, he made it so easy. When everybody else was playing this slow slugfest game, he played so fast and fluid and smart, and you just can't say enough. This is why he led 6 straight top 2 offenses in Phoenix, including 3 number 1 offenses, and not just 3 number 1 offenses, because not all number 1 offenses are created equal. 3 offenses that all rank among the top 5 relative offenses in the play-by-play era. And by the way, the number 1 offense, Logan, was Steve Nash's Mavs in 2004. So 4 of the top 5 relative offenses of the last 30 years belong to a Steve Nash team. And the offense scaled brilliantly to the playoffs. Nash in the playoffs from 2005 to 2010 with the Suns. 20 points per game, 11 assists per game on plus 7% relative true shooting. He led his offenses in those playoff runs to better than a plus 7 relative offensive rating. Like, that is all-time great offense they delivered in the playoffs. So again, if you're going to knock Steve Nash, it better have nothing to do with his offense. It better have nothing to do with his passing, because it's flawless. Like, genuinely. I think he brought more overall passing value than Jokic. I think the consistency with which he picked apart every single defense as a passer was different. There are certain little levers that you can try to pull against Jokic as a passer, and you'll find a little bit of success. There truly was nothing like that for Nash as a passer. And the all-time great offenses his passing fueled, like, Jokic has led great offenses, of course, not like what Nash did with the Suns, though, if you just look at the bottom line numbers, regular season or playoffs. So I give him the nod. I think he belongs in this number 2 spot. It's a tier of 3. But number 1, I don't really think you could convince me anybody else deserves this spot. I like what you said about Nash being the best half-court passer ever. I would hear that case, but Magic Johnson is the greatest passer to ever play in the NBA.
Yeah, and both of these guys were elite in transition too, but that's where I really think Magic just takes the cake. It's two things that I would emphasize in the difference. It's the height at which Magic has that you just can't teach height.
100%.
Like Magic has all these different playmaking angles that were available to him that weren't available to Nash. And in transition, I mean, both of these guys were great, but Magic is unreal. The Showtime Lakers revolutionized offense in the 80s, and Magic's deception, man, like his ability to fake or feint one way and to have his eyes, he's the most deceptive passer. And all these guys are great at this, but I think he's the most deceptive passer I've ever seen. Like, to just completely fake out a defense one way and then find another guy. And I know you didn't really include this in your criteria. Magic's audacity is really another thing that also puts him over the top. Like, Magic is out there just trying shit and the most flashy,
100%.
creative passer.
Well, but
ever.
audacity is absolutely part of passing value. I mean, when you can try and do shit that nobody else can, that's how you hit the home runs. That's what sets apart Magic, Nash, and Jokic as much as anything else, right? It's the vision and then the willingness to attempt that stuff and to know that you can actually make it happen. There's no comparison for Magic in that way, but that totally does factor in strongly to the guys who I think are the greatest passers ever. They're the most audacious, generally.
Yeah, and Magic's 101.
Yes.
The angles, I think, are important too, but also the technical passing with Magic too, the timing, the velocity, the accuracy. And again, I mean, just look at, and I get he's got great teammates, a lot of these guys too, right? But Magic, just set up Worthy and set up Kareem for so many easy buckets. Just ahead of his time, man. And I think that's a misconception, too, not only about Nash, but about Magic. People try to be like, Magic was an awesome scorer.
Yeah.
That's what made him, again, you were talking about it with Nash, but the ability to strike that balance so perfect. But defenses have to sell out on these guys. And we said it earlier, but having defenses in a bind, we talked about this with Jokic when Jokic was really coming on in the playoffs. It was this pick your poison kind of deal. It's like you can sell out on them scoring, but guess what? They've got you on the back end. You sell out on the pass, they're going to score on you. You're just you're eating out of the palm of their hand, man. Magic's 101, man. I didn't really – Nash is great.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about it too hard. I think Magic is in a – you're right. They're in a tier of their own, but Magic, I think, stands above the bunch.
Yeah, I mean, the 6'9" factor is probably the biggest thing, just like that he has all of this superhuman vision and accuracy and creativity and stuff, and he can simply do it, like, with angles that don't exist for Nash. I think that does matter. And then I do think the transition passing is a separator, which is ironic because Nash is one of the best transition passers ever and one of the best pace pushers. And we talk about the 7 seconds or less Suns, and I mean, so much of their offensive brilliance, obviously it was they had the best pick and roll player in the league and in NBA history, but they also had this elite transition offense, and they were leading the league in pace when, again, everybody else was playing a much slower, uglier brand of basketball, honestly. But there's no comparison for Magic in transition. Really, in any way, I don't think. Like, there was a time where I was like, is Magic or LeBron the best transition player ever? And I think it's like, okay, on any given transition possession, you can make the case that it's LeBron because he's such a freight train coming downhill, right? And a brilliant passer in his own right. Incredible. But when you just consider, like, how much more Magic made the most of what he possibly could have been, because there have been many stretches of LeBron's career where he's not as interested in, like, pushing pace, at least not close to Magic. Okay, like, regardless, Magic was full steam ahead. We're going to be the fastest team in the league every year. LeBron has often taken more of a methodical half-court approach. So transition, Magic, no comparison. And I genuinely think, like, as audacious, as brilliant as Nash was, still nobody would try the stuff that Magic did. And nobody could do the stuff that Magic did. And I don't know that there's another skill set that has just aged as beautifully as Magic's passing. And what I mean by that is we judge everything relative to era because as a sports fan, you operate under the assumption and understanding that the leagues just get better. Medicine gets better. Training gets better. Strategy gets better. Skill gets better, right? Like, the level of shooter that Steph Curry is completely unfathomable previously in NBA history. The level of passer that Magic Johnson is, I think if you dropped him in the NBA today, he'd still be the best passer in the league. Like, and again, that's not how we're judging this. We're doing it relative to era, but it is pretty cool to see like that one skill set that you're not just like, holy shit, that looks way different than everybody else out there in this game in 1985. You're like, whoa, I haven't seen anybody do that in the NBA like ever, you know, regardless of how great the players are right now. So it's just that ability, 6'9". You can see everything. You can make every conceivable pass. What he did in transition, the speed, the athleticism, the body control at 6'9", like how abnormal that was for that time, especially the malleability he had as a passer, where with that body control, like he can double clutch, fake one way, lay it down the other in midair at that size. It's just stupid. I do think he's the greatest tight window passer ever. I mean, he could just absolutely fire bullets in traffic to cutters. His velocity as a passer, I think, is the best ever too. He could just send that thing on a rope. And then like these one-handed hook passes and lobs where there's just a sliver of a window, and perfectly timed and placed bounce passes and perfectly led touch passes. And what's so incredible about Magic is what he did considering the spacing of his era. Like considering how often you've got two big men who are operating some area around the basket on the low block, and you don't have spacing with shooters. Like, it forced him, I guess just because he was such a genius, right? It didn't force anybody else in this era, but it forced him to attempt stuff that I don't know that anybody since has been forced to, just because obviously you have to test tight windows if you're going to be a great passer in today's NBA, but the windows by and large are bigger. I mean, the four players around you are occupying much larger areas of space. They're much farther apart. Magic was like just consistently threading the needle because he had to, and he did it in a way where like the risk was so outweighed by the reward. When we talk about the greatest offensive stretches ever, I mean, I do think that Nash's Suns have the best, and then I think that Magic's Lakers have the second best. I mean, 85 to 90, top two offense every year, 5 number one offenses. His passing was the engine of that in the playoffs. Historic offenses. 85 to 90, 4 number one playoff offenses in 6 years, and the best playoff offense ever in 1987. And he's doing this as a passer. By the way, even ramping up his playmaking volume in the playoffs. He went from 12.3 assists per game in the regular season to 13.3 in the playoffs. I don't even know how you dial up your passing volume when you're already Magic Johnson, but he did it as he's scoring north of 20 points per game on like plus 7% true shooting. It's incredible. I mean, he was a perfect offensive player, essentially, considering the time. And he was going to look you off, he was going to fool you, and he was going to, by whatever means necessary, get the ball to his target, create an opening, and the processing speed, maybe the fastest ever. Like, he jumped on every possible opportunity. He could do it out of the post, he could do it out of pick and roll, he could do it coming downhill from the top of the key. Like, even when we talk about, again, these sort of like idle dribbling passes, right, where you're just finding a guy in the action, with Magic, even that stuff looked different because the window didn't have to be what it had to be for anybody else. He would still try it and he would still fit it in. Like, I know maybe it sounds like we're sort of mythologizing Magic as a passer, but watching him, like, it truly is awe-inspiring. It is one of the coolest things, one of the coolest abilities any NBA player has ever had. I don't think there's any criticism of Magic as a passer. I guess if you're conservative pilled and you're like, he was too aggressive, but no, I just don't buy that at all. You know, I'll live with 3.5, 3.8 turnovers a game from Magic Johnson when he's making multiple plays a game that nobody else in the NBA and maybe nobody else in NBA history would. I really do think he's pretty clearly the best to ever do it as a passer.
Yeah, and that was the only thing I was going to bring up is if you knock that, it's like, well, the guy had the ball in his hands all the time, and he was still leading out the best offense in basketball. And what you mentioned earlier in the episode, you're going to take some of the bad when he is giving you the best offense ever.
Right.
I also liked your analogy with Steph. It's one of one. It is truly unique. When, I mean, I don't know about you guys, the audience, but when I think about someone passing a basketball, I think about Magic. When I think about someone shooting the basketball, I think about Steph. I
think about Gorgie Jang personally, but
the Gorgie Jang mid-range J.
Butter. Think about
top
Jason
10 most
Thompson.
efficient shots in NBA history. Jason Maxiell, left elbow J.
That's a good
Give me
shot.
that.
What about Glenn Baby Davis from the same spot? He was cash. The numbers may not support it. I don't care what the numbers say.
Bring back 16-foot jumpers, man.
Bring back a little Andre Blatch mid-post game. Come on now.
Andre Blatch, man.
Yeah.
I could go for that right now.
Sure, me too.
I agree with you, though, man. If you drop Magic into any era, he's the best passer in the league, and it's not particularly close. He's 101, man, and I don't know how you could have anybody else in this spot.
It's pretty cool, dude. Like, pretty clearly, the best athletes, the best ball handlers, the best shooters to ever play the game, they're all playing right now. I really do think the best passer to ever play the game played almost 40 years ago. Like, that's very cool. I mean, his career started 46 years ago. Like, shout out to Magic Johnson, man. What an absolute legend. I think that's pretty comprehensive, Logan. I think we covered everything. That was thorough. I suppose what you would expect from us here at Nerd Sesh. We hope you guys enjoyed that as much as we did. I had a lot of fun coming up with this list and talking about it. We are going to keep running back this series, so hopefully you guys are looking forward to those upcoming episodes. Scorers, shooters, offensive players, defensive players. We're going to cover all that in the coming weeks. We'll have a couple guests on, hopefully. That should be a ton of fun, so stay tuned for that. Speaking of guests, somebody who may reappear during this series, we did just have Tyler of Hoop Venue on for our last show. We talked about a lot of interesting stuff around the NBA headed into All-Star Weekend, so check that one out if you haven't. And everybody enjoy All-Star Weekend, I guess. I mean, it sucks. We all know that it sucks. You know, you're probably not going to enjoy it that much, but I hope that you have a good weekend regardless, just in your regular life. I hope you have a good weekend, and I hope you listen to some Nerd Sesh if you want. You know where to find us, YouTube. You can listen to the show on all audio platforms, and you can follow us on social for our daily mega viral content, baby. So, with that, as always, appreciate you guys. Hope you enjoyed the Yap Sesh. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.